This is it, the ultimate dimension for rest and stories, and it's called Sleepy Myths.
It started with a whisper, not from a person, but from the sky itself. A sound too soft to hear, yet too real to ignore. It moved through the still night like the memory of a dream, brushing past windows, through trees, and into one quiet garage at the edge of the universe. Inside, a boy tried to sleep, while a man, tired, brilliant, and endlessly lost, drifted half awake beside a machine that hummed like a heartbeat. For a moment, time itself hesitated. The stars pulsed once as if exhaling. Something old and patient stirred, and far beyond all galaxies, something small and human and like hope opened its eyes. Hey there, friend. Welcome back to Sleepy Myths. We truly love and care for you,
and we're so glad you're here with us tonight. Before we begin our journey, tell us, where in the world are you listening from and what time is it there?
Now grab your coffee, or maybe your pillow. Let's drift softly into tonight's story together. The night the stars shifted. It began with the hum, that low, familiar murmur of wires and glass tubes that filled Rick's garage, a sound that usually meant chaos was brewing. But tonight it was calmer, slower, like even the machines had grown sleepy. Morty lay on the couch, wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of dust and solder. The garage light flickered against the ceiling in slow rhythm, like waves brushing the shore. He couldn't sleep. Something in the air felt
alive. In the corner, Rick sat slumped over his workbench, goggles pushed high, flask dangling loosely in his hand.
The multiverse machine buzzed with a steady silver glow, its glass conduits rippling with dim starlight. Then, without warning, the air shifted. Not loudly, but deeply. The hum fell quiet for half a heartbeat. The stars outside brightened, bending slightly in place as though someone unseen had rearranged them. Rick stirred.
One eye cracked open. Morty sat up, blinking. Rick, did the sky just move?
Rick rubbed at his face.
The universe just blinked, Morty.
His voice was rough but strangely soft, almost like a lullaby muttered through half dreams. The universe blinked? Morty whispered. Rick gave a slow nod, eyes half shut again. Yeah, happens sometimes. Whole multiverse gets tired, takes a nap.
Don't worry about it, just
breathe with it. Morty didn't know whether to believe him. But when he looked out the window again, the stars really were breathing. Faint, synchronized pulses that matched the rhythm of his chest. Breathe in, the stars glow brighter. Breathe out, they fade again. Morty lay back down. His eyes followed the sky's quiet pattern, each shimmer soft and slow, like the galaxy's own lullaby. He could almost feel it through the glass, that shared heartbeat between himself and the universe. Rick's machine dimmed on its own, its circuits cooling to a gentle blue. The garage, once alive with chaos, now hummed with peace. Rick, too, had gone still, chin tilted, mouth open slightly. For once he looked fragile, human. Morty smiled to himself. Night, Rick, the narrator's voice, or perhaps Morty's own thoughts, seemed to drift from nowhere and everywhere at once. Sometimes the loudest minds fall asleep the hardest.
And when they finally rest,
the universe sighs with them. Outside, a wind moved through the trees, soft as a whisper. The stars rippled faintly again, not chaotic, but calm. Patterns bent and unbent like slow-moving waves. Morty felt his eyes grow heavier. The air seemed to thicken into a slow rhythm, drawing him inward. His mind wandered to the strange shimmer in the machine, to Rick's quiet snore, to that one glowing star that seemed to be looking straight back at him. Maybe, he thought, the universe was alive. Maybe it had been waiting for someone to notice. The garage settled into silence. The hum of machinery became a heartbeat. Rick mumbled something in his sleep, a sentence Morty barely caught. Every genius makes a promise once. The boy frowned softly, eyes fluttering. What promise? But Rick didn't answer. His breathing evened out, matching the stars. The narrator's voice returned, slow and tender. He didn't always understand Rick's words, but he understood his silence. Morty closed his eyes. The blanket felt heavier, warmer. The stars pulsed one more time, silver veins against a dark sky, then steadied. And in that quiet garage, where dreams and machines often blurred, everything finally went still. The story ends not with action, but with breath. A small,
sleeping moment that stretches forever. The night didn't end.
it simply folded itself around them, a soft, cosmic lullaby. Somewhere, far away, the universe kept breathing.
And dreaming right along. It starts, as all dreams do, quietly, without doors, without beginnings.
One moment Morty is lying in the faint blue glow of Rick's garage, and the next he's somewhere else entirely. There's moonlight on his hands. There's a slow rhythm in the sky, like breathing through silk. He doesn't remember falling asleep, only that the stars have changed again, and they seem to be watching him. Hey there, friend. Welcome back to Sleepy Myths. We're so glad you're here tonight. Wherever you are in the world, whatever time it is where you are, we want you to know that you're safe here. Take a slow breath in and a soft one out. Before we drift deeper, tell us, where in the world are you listening from?
Maybe it's midnight, maybe it's dawn. Now grab your coffee or your blanket.
And let's return to our story. Morty stands in a world that feels half like a dream and half like a memory he's forgotten. The ground beneath him is soft, glowing slightly as if made of sleeping clouds. Above him, the sky curls inward, painted with slow-moving constellations that form and unform shapes with every breath he takes. And there, wrapped gently around the moon, lies a dragon. Its scales shimmer like candlelight reflected on water. They aren't sharp or frightening. They glimmer like the surface of a calm lake, each one breathing faint golden light. The dragon's wings rest against the stars, and every time it exhales, 1,000 tiny lights scatter across the sky like falling wishes. Morty doesn't run. He doesn't even speak. He just watches. The dragon opens one enormous ancient eye, not to frighten but to see. It looks at Morty with the kind of gaze that makes time feel slow.
As if everything in the universe has been waiting for this single moment. Its voice is not sound. It's more like a hum that lives inside the chest.
A warmth that echoes through bones and breath. Little one, it says without words, why do you stay awake when the world is resting? Morty blinks. He doesn't know how to answer. He looks around at the drifting clouds, at the silver horizon that seems to bend with thought. I guess I don't know how to rest, he says softly.
Rick says sleeping's a waste of time. The dragon hums again, a deep, patient sound that makes the air vibrate like the low string of a cello. Then maybe it is not sleep you fear.
But stillness. Morty looks down at his hands. They're glowing faintly now, pulsing with the same light as the stars. He feels both tiny and infinite. Are you real? He asks. The dragon doesn't answer right away. Instead, it lowers its head, pressing its warm breath into the air until Morty can feel it, gentle and steady, like the tide of the ocean against a shore. I am every dream you've ever trusted enough to keep, it whispers, and everyone you've let go before it was ready. Morty's chest feels tight, but not in a painful way. The dragon moves closer, its scales glowing in waves like a lullaby made visible. Around them, stars drift like dandelion seeds in slow motion. You are made of wishes, the dragon says. All children are. But somewhere along the way, you stopped making them. I didn't mean to, Morty murmurs.
Things just got
Complicated. The dragon smiles a wide, gentle, knowing smile. Complicated, it repeats softly. That is another word for growing. Morty watches as the dragon unfurls its massive wings. Each feathered edge catches moonlight and folds it into patterns that seem to hum with stories. Cities, oceans, galaxies, all blooming and fading across its wings like slow-breathing dreams. Then the dragon leans closer again. Its enormous head lowers until one golden eye fills Morty's entire world. You will forget this, it says kindly. That is the nature of dreams, but it will not forget you. Morty feels something shift. Not outside him, but within.
a warmth begins to rise from his chest, as if the dragon's words are being etched there, soft and glowing. He takes a breath, and the air feels lighter.
He looks up, and the dragon's form begins to dissolve into starlight, scales breaking into gentle pieces of gold that drift upward. Wait.
Morty calls. When you wake, the dragon whispers, its voice already fading.
Tell the man who builds everything that some things are meant to be felt.
Not fixed. And then it's gone. The moon returns to being only a moon.
The sky exhales, the stars go quiet again, humming faintly like distant bells. Morty stands there for a moment longer, unsure whether to feel amazed or comforted. He looks down, his hands still faintly glowing, and wonders what he's supposed to do with this feeling. In the distance, he hears Rick's voice, soft and echoing, as if carried through dream space. "Morty, wake up! You're drooling on the bench again." The dream folds in on itself like silk, and Morty feels the weight of his own eyelids pulling him back. The dragon's glow fades behind him, but the hum, that deep, golden rhythm, stays. He wakes up to the sound of Rick's machine whirring softly. The air smells faintly of smoke and electricity. Rick's sitting there, working on something new, a cylinder of glass with small threads of light swirling inside. Morty blinks sleepily. "Rick."
I had this weird dream about a dragon.
Rick doesn't look up.
Yeah, kid.
Probably residual REM crossover. Happens when you nap near quantum feedback. Morty rubs his eyes. No, it felt real.
It said something about wishes. Rick stops turning his wrench.
For a long second, he doesn't say anything. Then, almost too quietly to catch. "Huh? Guess you met her then," Morty frowns. "Met who?" But Rick just smirks, tired, gentle, half a secret hidden in his eyes.
No wonder, kid, just
keep dreaming. The narrator's voice returns, soft as a sigh. Dreams don't end when you wake. Sometimes they just wait, quietly, for you to notice them again. The hum of the garage becomes slower. The night outside deepens, like velvet folding over sound. Morty closes his eyes again, breathing in time with the quiet machinery. Somewhere far beyond the stars, the dragon curls around the moon once more. Its breath matches Morty's own. Slow, steady, peaceful. "Rest now," the narrator whispers. The dragon is watching. The light fades. The hum softens, and sleep, that gentle, wordless companion, finally returns. The morning after the dream feels softer than usual. The air inside Rick's garage carries the faint scent of ozone and coffee mixed with something stranger, something almost like rain. The universe, Morty thinks, smells different when it's just been dreaming. Rick is sitting at the workbench, motionless for once, staring at a swirling puff of smoke trapped inside a clear glass tube. It moves like it's alive, curling into symbols, vanishing, then forming again. Every time it shifts, a dim silver glow flashes across his eyes. Morty rubs his face. "You've been up all night again, huh?" Rick grunts. That small sound halfway between exhaustion and focus. Time's relative, Morty, and relativity's boring. The boy yawns and glances around the garage, cables spilling off the table, blueprints scattered across the floor, the faint hum of something that feels like it shouldn't exist in this dimension. What's that thing? Rick taps the glass. A memory vaporizer. Or maybe a promise distiller. I'm still workshopping the name. Morty frowns.
A what now?
Rick looks up.
His face is calm, too calm.
You ever make a promise so old you forgot what it was, Morty? Morty shakes his head.
I don't think so. Rick turns the glass slowly, watching the smoke twist like a thought that can't stay still. Every genius, every builder, every wanderer makes one promise.
Not out loud, but not even to anyone else. Just to whisper to themselves, in a moment when they think no one's listening. Morty blinks, unsure whether this is science talk or something deeper. So, what was your promise? Rick's eyes flicker. Not the sharp blue of logic now, but something quieter, like tired candlelight. To catch a dragon that could breathe peace instead of fire. The words hang in the air for a long time. The garage hums. The machines slow their whirring, as if even they need to hear that sentence again. Morty leans forward. You mean like the one from my dream? Rick doesn't answer. He just keeps turning the glass. The smoke inside begins to form shapes. A coiling spiral, wings, the faint outline of a sleeping creature. For a second, Morty could swear he sees it. The same dragon, curled in miniature, glowing faintly like an ember. Rick sighs. Dreams have a habit of leaking through dimensions, kid. Maybe you caught mine. Or maybe it caught you. Morty feels a shiver run through him. Not fear, exactly, but recognition.
What happened to it? The dragon?
Rick sets the glass down. It's not a thing you catch with tools. That's the part I didn't get for a long time. You don't trap peace, Morty. You remember it. And I forgot. For a moment, the room feels heavy, not with sadness, but with time. The kind of silence that happens after years of trying to outrun your own mistakes. Outside, wind hums through the cracks of the garage door. It sounds almost like breathing. The narrator's voice drifts in. Soft, reflective, inviting. Sometimes the people who build the most do so because they once broke something they can't fix. Rick picks up a tiny screwdriver and spins it in his fingers. I built weapons before I built wishes.
Easier, you know.
The math's cleaner. But the dragon, it was supposed to be different.
I thought maybe I could engineer peace.
Program serenity. Bottle calm. He laughs quietly, a hollow sound that fades into a sigh. Turns out the universe doesn't take orders. Morty's gaze moves to the swirling smoke again.
It's calmer now, slower. Almost like it's breathing in rhythm with them.
So what's that thing doing now? Rick tilts his head, remembering. He stands up, walks to the open garage door, and stares out at the dull, grey morning. For a long moment, neither of them speaks. The light filters through dust in slow motion, the way time moves when no one's measuring it. Morty finally asks, "Did you ever find it?"
The dragon?
Rick's voice drops to a whisper.
Once, but I wasn't ready to see it. The boy steps closer.
What do you mean? Rick smiles faintly, eyes distant. Peace isn't something you can chase with equations.
It's smoke, Morty. Try to grab it and it disappears.
But breathe it in. He gestures toward the glowing glass. And maybe it changes you a little. Morty stares at the device. The smoke inside flickers, then begins to rise on its own, curling upward through the air. Rick doesn't move. He just watches it climb toward the ceiling, where it disperses into silver dust that glimmers like stars before fading completely. The garage grows still again. Morty whispers, "Did we just lose it?" Rick shakes his head. "Nah, promises like that don't get lost. They just wait until we're quiet enough to hear them again." The narrator speaks softly, voice fading into the rhythm of breathing. Maybe every genius carries a forgotten promise. One made of smoke. One meant to remind them that some inventions are not machines at all. Rick slumps back into his chair. You should sleep more, Morty. Dreams are safer than this junk. Morty half smiles. You too, Rick. Rick smirks. I'll sleep when entropy apologizes. They both laugh. Quiet, tired laughter that fades into stillness. The camera of the imagination pulls back, slowly, from the garage. The lights dim. The smoke that escaped floats higher, spreading across the morning sky. From far above, it looks like a single silver thread stretching between stars. A trail left by something ancient, remembering itself. The narrator returns.
Gentler now. Tonight, if you breathe deeply enough,
Maybe you'll find a promise of your own.
it might not look like a dragon.
It might not glow, but it will hum softly beneath your ribs, waiting for you to notice. A faint lullaby hums beneath the words. Mechanical, soft, like one of Rick's devices, slowly falling asleep. Morty yawns. The world blurs at the edges. The machines around him seem to fade into the sound of waves. He thinks of the dragon again, of its voice, of the warmth it left in his chest. Peace instead of fire, he murmurs. As his eyes drift closed, Rick looks over, for once.
Quiet, almost gentle, he whispers. Yeah, kid. That's the one. The lights dim completely.
The sound of the multiverse fades into a calm, low hum. Steady, like breathing, and somewhere beyond sight, the smoke reforms. Not gone, not broken, just waiting. The next night in the garage feels quieter than usual, like the whole universe has stepped out to listen. The air hums gently, filled with the sound of cooling metal and drifting thoughts. Morty sits at the table, tracing invisible lines with his finger, replaying Rick's words in his head. Peace instead of fire. It sounds simple, but somehow it's heavier than anything he's heard in his life. Rick is still at his bench, surrounded by glowing fragments of something half-built, half-remembered. His tools rest in odd patterns. A compass pointing nowhere, a magnifier fogged with condensation, a pen scribbling by itself on parchment that looks too old for this world. When Morty finally speaks, his voice is barely a whisper. You really think that dragon's still out there, Rick? Rick doesn't look up. Dragons' peace promises, they don't vanish. They just drift until someone's ready to look. Morty frowns, watching the pen as it moves.
Is that thing drawing by itself?
Rick leans back in his chair, rubbing his temples. Yeah, don't touch it.
It's connected to the multiversal subconscious grid, Morty blinks.
You mean dreams? Rick half smiles. Close enough. The pen continues to move on its own, sketching faint, silver lines that twist and pulse with a soft glow. Slowly, an image begins to form. Circles within circles, pathways of light, tiny dots that flicker like embers scattered across a cosmic floor. Morty tilts his head.
Is that a map?
Rick exhales long and slow. Not a map of places, Morty, a map of feelings. Worlds powered by emotions instead of physics. Morty's eyebrows knit. Wait, what?
You mean like happiness has gravity now?
Rick chuckles.
Something like that.
Every emotion you've ever felt leaves a kind of residue. Some dimensions run on fuel.
Others run on memory.
These ones, he taps the glowing parchment. They run on what people feel when they're too tired to speak. Morty studies the shimmering lines. They seem alive, shifting gently like waves under moonlight. Each section pulses a different color. Soft yellow, deep blue, faint violet, and a pale, warm orange that feels like sunrise. Rick points to each one. Joy, sorrow, patience, forgiveness. He pauses before the last one.
And that one's hope? Morty stares. That's beautiful, Rick grunts.
It's complicated. To reach the dragon, we've got to pass through all of them. Morty's eyes widen. Through feelings? Yeah, Rick mutters, adjusting his wristband. And they're not just metaphors, Morty. Each one is a world, literal, emotional ecosystems. You can't fake what you feel in there. The place will reject you if you lie. Morty shivers.
That sounds kind of intense. Rick looks over, and for a rare moment his expression softens.
That's why we're doing it slow. The narrator's voice glides in, gentle, low, reassuring. Some journeys can't be measured in distance or time. They unfold through the quiet chambers of the heart, one emotion at a time. Rick snaps his fingers, and the parchment rises from the table. It hovers between them, glowing brighter, the lines shifting and rippling like starlit water. Slowly, it expands, stretching until it fills the entire garage with light. Suddenly, Morty isn't sitting anymore. He's standing in a space that feels both inside and outside at once. The stars move like slow raindrops. The map stretches endlessly beneath his feet. Whoa, Morty whispers. Rick's voice echoes from somewhere close but distant, carried on soft wind. Each world has a flame, Morty, a memory that keeps it alive.
If we want to reach the dragon, we follow the ones that haven't gone out. Morty turns, seeing faint embers floating in the distance. Small, glowing orbs drifting in a velvet sea.
Each one hums faintly, like a heartbeat. He takes a slow breath, his voice hushed.
They look alive. Rick's shape emerges beside him, lit in silver-blue light.
They are. Those are people's last thoughts before they fell asleep. The quiet kind, the ones they never told anyone. Morty's heart aches a little.
Like wishes? Exactly, Rick says softly.
And every wish, every tiny ember, is part of the same fire. The forgotten flames. The narrator murmurs gently, like a lullaby hidden beneath wind. There are fires that burn for warmth, and fires that burn for meaning. The kind that stay alive only when someone remembers them. As they drift across the luminous field, Morty notices that each flame burns differently. Some steady, some flickering, some barely glowing at all. One of them pulses brighter when he looks at it. As if responding to his attention, he reaches out, and a memory unfolds. A small boy laughing under a tree, a dog running through tall grass, sunlight spilling like gold over everything. The image is simple, fleeting, and unbearably warm. Morty's breath catches.
It's someone's happy memory, Rick watches quietly.
Every feeling leaves light behind, Morty. Even the forgotten ones. Morty hesitates. Do you think
one of these flames is ours?
Rick smirks faintly. Wouldn't surprise me. They walk, or maybe float, through the field, passing clusters of glowing embers that hum like lullabies. The space around them grows dimmer, quieter, until it feels like they're walking through a dream that's trying not to wake up. Morty whispers, Rick, what if we never find the dragon? Rick shrugs. Then maybe the finding was never the point. For a while, neither of them speaks. The silence isn't empty. It's full of something warm and breathing. Eventually the map begins to fade, folding back into itself until the garage slowly reappears around them. The parchment settles once more on the table, its glow dimming to a soft, sleepy pulse. Rick looks at Morty, his voice almost tender. Every feeling's a doorway, Morty. You can't rush through them.
You just...
Step one at a time, Morty nods. So what's the first one? Rick studies the map. His eyes glint in the faint light. Forgiveness, Morty blinks.
But that's kind of deep for a Tuesday, Rick chuckles.
Yeah, welcome to the soft side of science. They both laugh quietly, and the sound blends with the low hum of the machines. The narrator's tone grows slower, softer, almost hypnotic. And as they stared at the glowing lines, two travelers understood something rare in that peace is not a place to reach, but a map that draws itself while you rest. The parchment flickers one last time, then folds neatly into a perfect square. Rick slides it into his coat pocket, eyes heavy. "Get some sleep, Morty. Tomorrow we start with the first door." Morty smiles faintly.
Yeah, forgiveness, Rick nods.
The hardest one to fake. Outside, the night sighs, stars blinking like faint coals in a resting fire. The garage light dims to silver blue, and the map's last ember glows faintly through Rick's pocket, pulsing in time with their breathing. The narrator's final whisper lingers like a lullaby. Even forgotten flames remember the hands that once warmed beside them. And with that, the world falls gently asleep again. The night after they discovered the map, the sky above the garage looked different. Wider somehow, softer, as if the stars were leaning closer to listen. Morty couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those glowing silver lines, shifting and pulsing behind his eyelids. Somewhere in the rhythm of it he could almost hear a heartbeat. His, Rick's, maybe the universe's. Rick was still awake too, though he pretended otherwise. His head rested against the back of his chair, goggles hanging loose around his neck, a faint shimmer of light still glinting from the map's folded edge in his pocket. The machines in the corner of the garage hummed low, like they were dreaming along with him. The narrator's voice drifts softly. Some nights don't end. They simply melt into new beginnings. Morty sat up and rubbed his eyes. "Rick, can I ask you something?" Rick's eyelids fluttered.
You just did. Yeah, but like a real question, Rick sighed, opening one eye. Shoot, do you ever think...
Maybe peace isn't something we find. Maybe it's something that finds us. Rick blinked slowly, then smirked. "Morty, peace doesn't find you. It sneaks up on you when you're too tired to keep running." Morty smiled faintly.
That's kind of poetic, Rick. Yeah, well, I'm sleepy, Rick muttered. The silence stretched out between them, long enough for the world outside to breathe again.
Then, faintly, almost imperceptibly, a sound. Not loud, not mechanical, but soft, harmonic. Like a lullaby sung by wind. Morty tilted his head.
Rick, do you hear that?
Rick's brow furrowed. Yeah, and unless you installed a wind chime in the garage while I wasn't looking, that's new. They stepped outside, barefoot, into the cool night. The moon hung low and gold, clouds drifting lazily across its face. But above the clouds, far higher, something shimmered. A shape, a line of silver light arcing gently across the dark. It looked like a door. Morty's breath caught. "Rick."
That's it, isn't it?
Rick didn't answer right away. He just stared up, eyes reflecting the starlight. Then he muttered, half to himself, "The first door." The wind changed. The sound deepened. Not a song anymore, but something like breathing. The clouds began to swirl, slow and patient, forming a spiral that reached toward the stars. The narrator's voice hums softly. There are doors that are built with hands.
And doors that open when hearts begin to listen. Rick took out the folded map.
It pulsed gently as if recognizing the moment. He turned to Morty. "You ready?" Morty hesitated. "Ready for what?" Rick smiled. Not his usual crooked grin, but something smaller, quieter. To step into the kind of place that remembers you better than you remember yourself. He pressed a button on his wristband, and a beam of blue light shot upward, tracing a path toward the shimmer above. The air trembled, stars bent, the spiral of clouds parted, and there it was, a glowing outline of a door floating in the sky. Morty's voice was a whisper.
It's beautiful, Rick nodded.
And very probably deadly, but mostly beautiful. They rose slowly, gravity softening, the world below dimming. The sky around them turned velvet blue, thick with stardust. Morty reached out, fingers brushing the glowing edge of the door. It felt warm, like sunlight through glass. The door opened without sound. What lay beyond wasn't space. It wasn't anything Morty recognized. It was a sky that breathed, clouds drifting like whales, mountains suspended upside down, rivers of light curving through the air. Every color glowed softly, muted like watercolor under moonlight. Morty gasped.
It's
Like a dream, Rick stepped forward. It's a world that runs on patience. Everything here moves at the speed of rest. The air shimmered with gold dust. Morty could see birds frozen mid-flight, their wings stretched mid-beat. A leaf drifted past, slow as a sigh. Even the light itself seemed reluctant to hurry, Morty whispered. It feels calm. Rick glanced around. Yeah, don't get used to it. This dimension's powered by emotional balance. Stay too long and it'll put you to sleep permanently. Morty laughed softly. Maybe that's not so bad, Rick didn't argue. For once he seemed content to just walk. Slow steps through the glowing air, hands deep in his coat pockets. Every footfall rippled the world slightly, like walking through a dream made of still water. The narrator murmurs, "Some worlds do not test your strength. They test your ability to stay gentle." As they wandered, Morty noticed figures in the distance, silhouettes reclining on floating stones, eyes closed, faces peaceful. Some smiled faintly. Others looked like they were listening to distant music.
None stirred. Who are they?
Morty asked quietly. Rick studied them. Travelers, maybe? Dreamers? People who came here looking for something and found rest instead. Morty frowned.
Like forever?
Rick sighed.
Everyone needs a different kind of ending, Morty. They passed beneath an arch of silver mist.
On the other side stood a small platform, circular, carved from smooth stone. At its center shimmered a crystal sphere, glowing faintly. Morty stepped closer. Inside the sphere swirled thousands of tiny lights, each one pulsing softly. Rick, what is this? Rick smiled faintly.
The memories of those who stopped running. Morty stared at it.
They look happy. Yeah, Rick said softly. Happiness and peace aren't always the same thing, Morty, but they can live next door to each other. He placed his hand against the sphere. For a moment, his reflection stared back. Tired, older, softer. Then he whispered something Morty couldn't hear. The sphere pulsed once and grew dimmer, as if accepting his words. Morty hesitated. What did you say? Rick shrugged. Just told it thanks for waiting. The narrator's tone grows hushed. Sometimes gratitude is the last step before rest. As they turned to leave, Morty glanced back. The sphere flickered once, then split the air with a faint shimmer. A small tear opened above them, glowing white-blue. Rick raised an eyebrow. Well, would you look at that? The door home, Morty smiled. Or the next world, Rick chuckled. You're getting the hang of this. They stepped through the shimmering light. The world of patience faded, its gentle heartbeat slowing, fading into silence. When Morty blinked again, they were back above the stars, the door closing behind them. The night sky stretched out endlessly below. Rick hovered there, suspended between universes, and whispered, "You feel that, Morty?"
The stillness?
Morty nodded.
Yeah, Rick smiled faintly.
That's the sound of the universe remembering how to rest. The narrator's voice drifts in, like the edge of a dream, and as they floated there, halfway between where they'd been and where they were going, the stars themselves seemed to breathe, slow even, peaceful. The door shimmered one last time before dissolving into the horizon. Rick sighed and said, "Come on, kid. Let's keep moving before I accidentally start meditating." Morty laughed softly.
You'd be bad at it. Exactly, Rick said, smiling. They drifted downward, carried by quiet light.
The sky hummed gently, like a lullaby too old to remember its own lyrics. And as their silhouettes sank into the blue, the stars blinked once, slowly, fondly, as if tucking them in. When Rick and Morty drifted back into the world between worlds, the stars seemed different, warmer, slower, humming with the kind of music that isn't played but remembered. The map they carried shimmered faintly in Rick's coat pocket, its silver veins glowing like quiet veins of lightning beneath fabric. The last door had taught them stillness. The next would test something deeper. Rick tilted his head back, squinting at the infinite sky. Somewhere far above, a pulse of emerald light flickered, distant, rhythmic, alive.
There, he said softly.
That's our next stop. Morty followed his gaze, squinting. What is that? Rick smiled faintly. Something that used to guard time. Before time learned to guard itself, Morty frowned.
So like a guardian?
Rick chuckled quietly. A dream older than gravity. They drifted upward again, not falling, not flying, just rising. The space around them thickened into a deep blue haze, like the inside of a vast sleeping eye. The stars bent and blurred. Then, out of the fog, something massive moved. Morty's voice caught. Rick, is that? The narrator's tone softens. Some beings are too large to belong to any one world. They exist between dreams. Patient and endlessly awake. A shape unfolded before them. Wings like continents, scales like shattered glass reflecting galaxies. The creature's body coiled through the darkness, glimmering gold and green and silver.
Its eyes, enormous and ancient, opened slowly, each one filled with swirling constellations. It was a dragon, not the kind of dragon from books or fairy tales.
This one seemed carved from the very substance of the sky, its breath forming stars, its heartbeat echoing through dimensions. Morty whispered, Rick.
It's beautiful, Rick nodded, voice barely above a murmur.
Meet Aurelian, the keeper of forgotten days. The dragon's head lowered. Its gaze passed through them calm, endless. Then a sound filled the air. Not words, not exactly, but something that felt like them. The voice resonated in their bones. Who stirs the silence? Morty stumbled backward.
Hi, sorry. We didn't mean to, Rick raised a hand.
We're travelers, just passing through, looking for
rest. The dragon's enormous eyes glowed softly. Rest is not taken.
It is offered. Rick tilted his head.
Then consider us, asking politely. A low rumble rolled through the sky, a sound like distant thunder, smiling. Few who come to my sky remember how to listen. You are still learning. The dragon's wings shifted, and the stars around them moved like feathers in slow wind.
Morty felt weightless, like a dream being breathed by something greater. Rick looked up. We heard you guard the gate of renewal. I guard nothing, the dragon replied.
I remember, the words lingered.
Morty blinked.
Remember what?
Every time the universe forgot itself. The dragon unfurled one vast claw, and between its talons shimmered a sphere of light, spinning slowly, glowing pale gold. Inside it, Morty saw glimpses, stars forming, collapsing, reforming, oceans rising, falling, civilizations blinking in and out of existence like candle flames. The narrator whispers, the past is never gone. It merely changes its shape to stay unseen. Morty stared at the sphere, mesmerized.
It's everything, Rick's voice softened.
It's memory, Morty, pure, undistorted memory, the kind no living thing can hold without losing itself. The dragon's eyes dimmed slightly. To carry memory is to dream with open eyes. It is not always kind, Morty frowned. So you're saying remembering hurts? The dragon's tail coiled gently around a cluster of stars, only when the heart is not ready to forgive. For a moment, the three stood, suspended in that vast, tranquil space. Two mortals and something far beyond mortal. The air shimmered, heavy with thought. Then the dragon lowered its great head until its golden eye filled Morty's vision. Inside that eye he saw himself, small, afraid, curious. He saw Rick too, older, lonelier than he'd ever looked before. Behind them both he saw doors. Dozens, hundreds, each leading somewhere softer than the last. "You seek rest," the dragon murmured. "But rest comes only when the restless heart learns to remember without pain," Rick smirked. "Yeah, well, we're working on it," the dragon blinked, slow, deliberate. "And let this be your trial." The air around them trembled. The stars bent inward, collapsing into light. Suddenly, Morty and Rick were no longer floating. They were standing in a vast, mirror-like plain beneath an endless golden sky. All was silent. Morty looked down and gasped. Reflected in the ground wasn't his face, but scenes, moments from his life, looping gently. He saw himself arguing with his sister, hugging his mum, running from danger, laughing uncontrollably at something Rick had said. Rick glanced at his own reflection. For a second his jaw tightened. Morty caught glimpses and fragments of loneliness, guilt, and something that looked like regret. Morty whispered, "Rick, what is this place?" Rick's voice was quiet.
"The dragon's mirror."
"It shows you what you still carry." The narrator hums softly. "To find peace, one must first face the echoes that refuse to fade." Morty knelt beside the reflection. It shimmered, and he saw himself crying, not from fear, but from wanting things to stay the same. He reached out, his fingers brushing the image. Warm light spread up his arm, gentle and forgiving. Across from him, Rick's reflection rippled too, showing a younger Rick, one who laughed easily, one who hadn't yet built walls made of cynicism and wit. Morty looked up at him. "Rick, do you miss him?" Rick didn't answer right away. Then quietly, "Every day." The dragon's voice returned, soft now, like wind across sand. "Then remember him, not with grief, but gratitude." The light around them deepened. Morty felt his heartbeat slow, his breath matching the rhythm of the stars. Rick's shoulders eased. For the first time in what felt like centuries, he looked almost peaceful. "You have listened," the dragon said.
"Now you may pass." The golden plain dissolved, replaced once more by the sky.
The dragon's vast form shimmered above them, dissolving into dust that sparkled across the horizon. Morty whispered, "Where did it go?" Rick smiled faintly. "Back to where dreams sleep." The map in his pocket glowed, revealing a new door. Silver. Pulsing like a slow heartbeat. The narrator's voice drifts in, and, the travelers moved onward, lighter now, not because the path had grown easier, but because their hearts had learned how to rest. Rick turned toward the glowing door. "Ready for the next one, kid?" Morty nodded, a soft smile on his face.
"Yeah, Rick, I think I'm finally starting to get it." They stepped forward.
Into the gentle light, their shadows stretching behind them until the stars themselves seemed to sigh. When the last shimmer of the Dragon Keeper's sky faded behind them, Rick and Morty stepped into a silence that wasn't empty, but full. It was the kind of silence that hums gently, like a dream about to begin. The stars no longer blazed. They pulsed, slow and soft, as if the whole cosmos were breathing in unison. Morty tilted his head. "It's quiet, Rick." Rick adjusted his coat, squinting at the horizon, though there wasn't really one. Just a vast expanse of pale violet mist. "Yeah, feels like the universe finally took a nap." The narrator's voice lowers to a whisper. "There are worlds that wake and worlds that dream. But some worlds, they rest. They fold themselves inward, sighing into sleep." The mist around them thickened until it felt like walking through velvet. Every sound, the rustle of their steps, The faint hum of Rick's portal gun was muffled, softened, like sound underwater. After a while, they came upon a field of floating lights. They drifted above the ground like dandelion seeds made of starlight. Each one flickered gently as if pulsing with dreams. Morty reached for one, and it glided toward his palm. It touched his skin, and for a heartbeat he felt something, not pain, not joy, something between them, like a sigh from another life. He saw flashes of a world he didn't know, a city sleeping beneath glass domes, people lying peacefully in glowing beds, the hum of machinery fading into heartbeat-like rhythm. Then it was gone. Morty blinked.
Rick, what was that?
Rick knelt, studying the air.
Residual dream energy, he muttered.
Old civilizations figured out how to rest forever.
Locked themselves into perfect sleep loops, Morty frowned. You mean...
They just sleep?
Forever?
Rick nodded slowly. Yeah, they called it the sleep of worlds, when they realized existing hurt more than dreaming. The narrator hums softly, wrapping the listener in quiet thought. Not all endings are endings. Some are pauses so deep they look like forever. They walked through the glowing field, their silhouettes drifting like ghosts. Rick's eyes flicked across the mist, searching. Morty watched him, his voice small. You ever think about doing that, Rick? Just sleeping forever? Rick gave a half-smile that didn't quite reach his eyes.
I already do, Morty. Every time I stop pretending I've got it all figured out. Morty said nothing.
The air shimmered. Ahead, a faint outline appeared. A massive, circular platform suspended in the mist. Upon it stood hundreds of crystalline pods arranged like petals of a flower. Inside each one lay a figure, still and peaceful, their faces faintly lit from within. Morty stepped closer, awe spreading through him. Are they alive? Rick placed his hand against one of the pods. Depends how you define it. His breath fogged the crystal slightly.
They uploaded their dreams.
Whole societies of them, living endless nights full of warmth and light. The narrator's tone drifts into reverence. Imagine choosing to stay in the softest part of your own story, where everything still glows. Morty peered at a nearby pod. Inside lay a woman with silver hair that floated weightlessly around her. Her lips curved into a faint smile. Beneath the glass, a heartbeat pulsed. Slow and steady, in sync with the stars. She looks happy, Morty whispered. Rick nodded. They all do. They built a piece that couldn't be broken, so they stayed inside it. Stood there for a long time, just listening. The hum of the pods wasn't mechanical, it was musical. 1,000 quiet notes rising and falling, like the sound of a giant creature breathing in its sleep. Morty eventually sat down, crossing his legs. Do you think they ever wake up? Rick looked around. The mist, the stillness, the rhythm. Nah, maybe that's the point. You don't wake up from peace. For a while, neither of them spoke. The stars dimmed and brightened, like slow blinks. The narrator invites the listener closer. Take a breath, in and out. Feel the rhythm of the sleeping worlds. The same rhythm your own heart keeps. Morty closed his eyes.
It's kind of nice, he murmured.
Like everything's okay for once, Rick's expression softened. He sat beside Morty, their reflections glowing faintly in the mirrored floor.
Don't get used to it, kid.
Peace this deep makes you forget you ever had questions. Morty smiled sleepily. Maybe that's not so bad. Rick's eyes lingered on one of the pods. An older man inside, hands folded over his chest, peaceful, unburdened. Something flickered across Rick's face. Longing, maybe. Regret. He whispered, maybe someday. The mist curled around them like a blanket. The air tasted faintly of ozone and lavender. Every few seconds, one of the sleeping figures exhaled, sending soft ripples through the fog. Waves of breath, spreading outward, slow and endless. Morty leaned back on his hands, gazing upward.
You ever wonder if maybe this is what the dragon meant? Rest that isn't taken but offered.
Rick looked at him sideways. You're starting to sound like the narration, Morty. Morty grinned faintly. Maybe the narration's right. Rick didn't argue. He just leaned back beside him, the glow of the pods reflecting in his tired eyes. For a few quiet minutes, the two sat there, scientist and grandson, noise and stillness, both wrapped in the same gentle breath of the sleeping world. The narrator's tone softens, becoming almost a lullaby. In the sleep of worlds, even stars take turns closing their eyes. The galaxies slow their spin. Time folds its arms and sighs. Morty's eyes grew heavy. His voice was almost a whisper. Rick! Do you think peace like this could be real?
Like, for us?
Rick didn't answer right away. Then, with a faint smile, maybe, Morty. Maybe peace just looks different for everyone. Morty nodded, already half asleep. Yeah, maybe mine looks like this. Rick turned to look at him, the kid who still believed the universe could be kind. He pulled off his coat and draped it over Morty's shoulders. The mist swirled lazily around them, cool and weightless. For once, Rick didn't reach for a flask or a gadget. He just watched the pods breathe, slow, gentle, alive. His voice dropped to a whisper that only the stars could hear. Sleep well, kid. The narrator's closing lines float through the air like the last notes of a lullaby. And there, beneath the dreaming stars, the two travelers rested, not in victory but in stillness, the kind that lives between one breath and the next, the kind that reminds you the universe is still, somehow kind. The stars dimmed once more, and for a long, endless moment, even the galaxies seemed to sleep. The world of sleepers faded behind them like a sigh, disappearing into mist. When Rick and Morty stepped back through the portal, the color of the air had changed, softer now, as if touched by the breath of that resting world. Everything in the garage looked the same, but it felt different. The cluttered tools, the flickering neon light, the faint hum of the portal gun. All of it had a strange quietness. Morty rubbed his eyes.
Feels weird being back, huh? Rick didn't answer.
He stood still, hands in the pockets of his lab coat, staring at nothing in particular. For once, the usual glint of sarcasm in his eyes was gone. The narrator's voice lowers to a velvet whisper. Sometimes, after you visit peace, even noise sounds like memory. Morty noticed the way Rick's shoulders slumped. Not from exhaustion, but from something heavier, older. He wanted to ask what was wrong, but Rick already moved to the workbench, flicking on a dim blue lamp. Got a,
Recalibrate the phase modulator? Rick muttered, though nothing in front of him needed fixing.
His hands trembled slightly. Morty sat on a stool nearby, watching him.
You okay, Rick?
Rick gave a small snort. Kid, okay is just a statistical illusion. He paused, then added, softer. I'm fine. The narrator hums softly. Not with pity, but understanding. He wasn't fine, but fine was the closest word he could stand. A long, quiet moment passed. Outside, the night wind brushed against the windows. The stars beyond the glass pulsed gently, like they were breathing again. Slow, in rhythm, Morty leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. You're thinking about something.
I can tell. Rick didn't look up.
He adjusted a screw that didn't need adjusting. I'm thinking about the first time I tried to make peace in a bottle, he said flatly. Didn't end well, Morty blinked. Peace in a bottle? Rick sighed, leaning back. Yeah, I figured if you could distill chaos, you could probably reverse engineer calm. Thought I'd create a substance that could quiet a mind, erase regret, anxiety, pain.
Liquid serenity. Morty's eyes widened.
Sounds kind of amazing, Rick gave a tired chuckle. Yeah, tell that to the lab that melted. The narrator's tone folds into gentle melancholy. He had tried to build peace the only way he knew how, through equations, through glass and flame. But peace doesn't boil. It breathes. Rick reached into a drawer and pulled out a small vial, cracked, dusty, filled with faintly glowing liquid. Its light was soft, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. "Didn't throw it away?" he said.
Couldn't. Every so often I look at it and remember what failure smells like. Morty leaned closer, voice soft.
"Why didn't it work?" Rick stared at the vial, then at Morty. "Because you can't build peace without believing in it first." That silence, deep, warm, endless, filled the room. Morty didn't know what to say. For once there were no sarcastic quips, no science talk to hide behind, just truth, raw and quiet. He watched Rick set the vial down gently. The light inside flickered, catching reflections across the metal tools. It cast soft patterns on Rick's face, and for a fleeting second he didn't look like a genius or a madman. He looked like someone who had been searching for sleep his entire life. The narrator's voice slows.
Almost like breathing. Even the brilliant grow tired of their own storms. Rick sat down in his old rolling chair,
The one that squeaked whenever he leaned back. He rubbed his eyes with the heel of his hands. "You ever notice, Morty, how peace and regret sound kinda similar when you whisper 'em?" Morty tilted his head.
I never thought about it. Rick chuckled softly.
"Yeah? Most people don't." He looked at the ceiling. The flickering bulb above them seemed to dim in rhythm with his thoughts.
I had a daughter once, he murmured.
She used to draw stars. Said she wanted to count all the ones that blinked slower than her heartbeat.
I told her that was stupid, that the universe doesn't care about counting.
But she did it anyway. Morty's chest tightened.
Rick, you mean...
Rick cut him off with a small wave. "Doesn't matter. Point is, sometimes I wish I'd just watched her draw." The narrator's voice trembles slightly.
Then steadies, tender.
Understanding. He carried his genius-like armor, but underneath it...
Every star was a scar he never let heal. Morty leaned closer. Is that why you made the peace serum?
Rick gave a humorless grin. Maybe, or maybe I was just tired of being the loudest mind in a quiet universe. For a long time, the only sound was the faint hum of the machines cooling down. The air felt thick, not heavy, but sacred, like a moment that shouldn't be spoken over. Rick finally stood up and went to the window. Outside, the stars shimmered faintly in the misty sky. He reached up, as if to touch them. Morty whispered, "You think she's out there somewhere?" Rick smiled faintly. "If she is, she's smarter than me."
Probably built a better version of this place. Morty grinned tiredly.
"Maybe she's sleeping in one of those dream pods we saw." Rick nodded, eyes soft. "Yeah, maybe that's her piece." The narrator's voice lowers, inviting the listener to relax, to exhale slowly. There are regrets that live like ghosts, but sometimes they just want to be seen, not solved. Rick turned from the window, the faint starlight tracing the edges of his face. "Morty, do me a favor." "Yeah, Rick? If I ever try to make peace in a bottle again, stop me. Remind me it's something you have to feel, not invent." Morty smiled. "Deal." Rick gave a small nod, and for once, the gesture didn't feel like dismissal. It felt like a promise. He turned off the light. The garage was bathed in moonlight now. Silver, calm, forgiving. Morty yawned, leaning back against the wall. Rick sat beside him. Neither spoke. After a while, Rick murmured, "You know, kid, maybe peace is just letting yourself get quiet long enough to hear someone else breathe." Morty smiled sleepily.
You're doing that philosopher thing again, Rick. "Yeah," Rick said softly.
"Don't get used to it," the narrator whispers, almost fading into the dark. And there they stayed. A scientist with too many regrets, and a boy who still believed in the sound of peace. The night held them both, gentle as starlight, quiet as forgiveness. Morty's eyes closed first. Rick followed soon after, his head tilting back. the faintest trace of a smile on his lips. Outside, the stars pulsed in time with their breathing, a universe rocking them both to sleep. The night felt different the next time they stepped through the portal. The air shimmered, heavy with memory. Not light or sound, but something slower, older. The narrator's voice drifts in softly, like wind brushing over quiet fields. Some worlds aren't made of matter or light. Some are made of everything we tried to forget. They stood at the edge of a vast, glowing horizon. Clouds hung low, drifting like lanterns. Each one shimmered faintly, showing fragments inside. Laughter, childhood faces, tiny flashes of life. Morty blinked.
Rick, are those memories?
Rick nodded, adjusting a dial on his wristband. Memory clouds. Dimension Super Lambda. They float here when a mind can't hold them anymore. Morty tilted his head, eyes wide. So like, the sky is made of people's forgotten moments. Rick smirked faintly. Yeah, pretty poetic for a universe that runs on quantum decay. But even he spoke softer now, his voice subdued by the hum of the air. Every few seconds a faint chime rang out, like glass wind bells being touched by invisible hands. The two began walking across a bridge that didn't seem to have been built, but remembered. Each plank glowed under their feet, as if the act of remembering gave it form. Beneath them, the world rippled with half-seen lives, a dog wagging its tail, a mother humming to a child, someone waving goodbye from a porch. Morty's throat tightened.
It's beautiful, he whispered. Rick only nodded, though the faintest tremor crossed his lips.
Yeah, that's the problem. They walked further until one cloud drifted close, lowering itself almost like it wanted to be seen. Inside, Morty glimpsed something small, a younger version of himself crying quietly in a school hallway. Rick's hand twitched. He turned away before Morty noticed. The narrator's voice softens. Sometimes memories don't come to hurt us. They just want to be remembered gently. Morty reached out and touched the edge of the cloud. It was cool like dew on glass. The scene shimmered. And suddenly he saw Rick in the distance of the memory, watching over him, unrecognized. He gasped softly.
Rick, was that?
Rick sighed. Yeah, I checked in once or twice. You didn't know? Morty blinked back, surprise. Why didn't you ever tell me? Rick shrugged, his tone fragile beneath the usual gruffness. You didn't need to know.
Sometimes being seen ruins the magic of just
being cared for. The silence after that felt sacred. Morty didn't answer. He just kept walking, glancing up at the drifting sky, each cloud pulsing with quiet stories. One held an image of a picnic under a tree. Another showed a girl sketching constellations on the back of her hand. The narrator hums a soft line of lullaby-like poetry. Every memory was a candle once. It burns softer now, not to light the world, but to warm what remains. As they walked, Morty asked, "Do you ever think the universe remembers us, Rick?" Rick looked up at the endless, glowing expanse.
Nah, the universe doesn't remember.
But maybe memory is the universe's way of dreaming, Morty smiled.
That's kind of sweet, Rick chuckled.
Don't quote me on it. Ahead, the bridge ended at a lake of mist. The water didn't ripple. It shimmered, mirroring the sky above. Rick crouched beside it, pulling a small device from his coat. It clicked and hummed, scanning the air. "This lake's not water," he muttered.
It's collective recall, a pure consciousness residue. Morty stared at his reflection in the glowing mist.
It shimmered, but instead of his own face, he saw flashes of moments he'd lived and forgotten. Laughter in the rain, a song he'd once loved, the warmth of holding his mother's hand. He exhaled slowly.
I didn't know I'd forgotten so much. Rick said nothing.
He stared at his own reflection, but what looked back wasn't him. It was a younger Rick, holding a tiny child with blonde hair. The reflection smiled softly. Rick froze. Morty turned, watching him. "Rick?" Rick cleared his throat. wiping his face as if brushing away dust. It's just old data, nothing real. But Morty could see the tremor in his hand. He didn't push. He just sat beside him. The narrator's voice lowers to a hush. Some truths are too tender to name, but silence, when shared, becomes its own kind of forgiveness. The lake rippled faintly as a breeze passed over. One of the clouds above began to descend again, glowing brighter, almost gold. It drifted near Rick until he had to look up. Inside the cloud, faint but visible, was an image of Rick and his daughter drawing stars on a garage wall. She looked up at him and said something soundless, her lips forming the words slowly. Rick mouthed them along. He still remembered them, even after all this time.
"You don't have to fix everything, Dad," Rick's voice cracked, so quietly Morty barely heard it.
"Yeah, I know, kid." The cloud pulsed once, then slowly rose, fading back into the silver-blue sky. Rick rubbed his hands over his face and exhaled shakily. "All right, sentimental detour over."
"Let's move," Morty smiled faintly.
"You sure?" Rick gave a half grin. "Yeah, I don't do feelings after 11 p.m. They began walking again, the bridge reforming under their steps, guiding them toward the next portal. The air shimmered brighter now, calmer, clearer, like something in both of them had been unclenched. Morty tilted his head toward the heavens.
"Hey, Rick, yeah? What if every memory here was just
waiting to be forgiven?" Rick looked at him, surprised, then smiled faintly. "And I guess this place is the safest part of the multiverse." The narrator slows the words, each one falling like snow. And maybe it was, because forgiveness, once found, hums quietly, like starlight learning how to sleep. They reached the end of the bridge. The portal shimmered ahead, gentle, silver, calm. Rick pressed a button, and the doorway opened like a curtain of light. He looked back once, just once, at the sky behind them. It glowed brighter than before, full of soft memories now at rest. "Guess I'll let the past keep itself company," he murmured. Morty smiled. "Good idea, Rick." Rick glanced down at him, a faint warmth in his voice. "Don't tell anyone I said that," Morty grinned sleepily. "Who would I tell?" Together they stepped through the glowing light, their shadows merging as the bridge dissolved behind them. Not gone, just remembered. The narrator's final lines whisper across the dark, soothing and slow. Above them, the sky exhaled, full of stories finally allowed to rest. And somewhere in that soft glow, a scientist and a boy became part of the memory too. If you're listening, let the sky remember you tonight, not for what you've done, but for what you've let go. The next portal opened like the edge of a dream. A slow, golden light seeped through, spilling across the floor of Rick's lab. Warm, soft, ancient. The hum of the machine faded, replaced by something deeper, like the steady rhythm of ocean waves breathing in sleep. The narrator's voice came in quietly, almost a whisper. "Not all awakenings are loud. Some are as gentle as dawn realizing it's time to rise." Rick and Morty stepped through together.
Instantly, the air felt heavier. Not oppressive, but meaningful, thick with silence that wanted to be listened to.
They found themselves standing on a field of clouds, their feet sinking into softness that glowed faintly with gold.
Above, the sky curved like an enormous dome of twilight, dotted with stars that shimmered as if alive. Morty squinted upward.
"Whoa, Rick, are we—"
"In the sky?"
Rick's voice was softer than usual. "Nah, we're somewhere older than that. A place before skies existed." Every few seconds, a low rumble echoed through the air. Not thunder, not machinery, but the sound of something breathing.
Something vast.
Morty turned in slow circles, trying to locate it, but the sound came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Rick he whispered. "What is that?" Rick didn't answer right away. He took a slow breath, eyes narrowing. "We found it," he murmured. "The dragon's heartbeat." The narrator let the words linger, weaving them like a lullaby. For every heart that beats too fast, somewhere in the universe,
Another heart beat slow enough to calm it. Morty's eyes widened as the golden mist ahead began to swirl, forming a slow, circular pattern.
the clouds rolled outward like waves, and from the center of the motion rose something colossal. Scales glimmering like sunlit glass, eyes closed, wings folded against the night. The dragon. Its body seemed to stretch endlessly, a serpent of starlight and moonfire coiled around itself in peaceful sleep. Its breathing stirred the air like gentle tides, and every exhale filled the sky with shimmering motes of dust that drifted like falling feathers. Morty stepped closer without realizing it, his voice trembling.
"It's beautiful." Rick didn't move.
His expression was unreadable, awe, regret, understanding all at once. "You're looking at the last dream alive in this universe, Morty. Everything else." Woke up too soon, the dragon stirred.
One immense eyelid lifted halfway, revealing a golden iris with constellations swirling inside.
The entire field of clouds trembled, but not in fear, in reverence. The narrator's tone grew softer still. "When the eternal stirs, the world does not shake from terror, but from recognition." Morty whispered, "Rick, it's looking at us."
Rick didn't move.
"Good. Maybe it's deciding if we're worth the trouble," the dragon exhaled. The breath washed over them in a wave of warm air, scented faintly like rain and ancient wood. Morty's body relaxed instantly. His shoulders loosened, his heartbeat slowed.
He felt safe. It spoke, but not with sound.
Its voice moved through their thoughts, vast and echoing. "You came searching for what cannot be found," it said. The words slow and echoing. "But you remembered what cannot be lost." Morty blinked, his eyes filling with tears. "We just wanted..."
"Peace," he whispered. The dragon's immense head tilted slightly as if considering.
"Peace is not given.
"It is uncovered, beneath the noise, beneath the fear."
You carry it already." Rick looked down at the clouds under his boots. His usual sharp humor was gone.
"I've spent my whole life trying to fix things," he muttered.
"Turns out the universe doesn't need fixing. Just..."
"Softening." The dragon's eye closed halfway again, glowing faintly brighter.
"Then you are learning," the narrator's voice returned, quiet as a breath. "Sometimes the lesson is not to act, but to be still long enough for the truth to approach you." Morty wiped his eyes and took another step forward.
"Are you going to disappear now, like all the other things we find?"
The dragon smiled, a subtle curve of light moving through its form.
"I was never gone, little dreamer."
"I sleep inside every quiet moment you've ever ignored." Morty frowned softly.
"So you were always here?"
"Always, but you needed to fall silent to hear me." Rick gave a small, weary laugh.
"Story of my life." The dragon's breath deepened again, filling the air with gold.
The narrator's tone lowered into hypnotic warmth. The scientist found stillness where there was once motion. The boy found wonder where there was once fear. And the world, for one perfect second, remembered how to rest. Morty sat down on the glowing clouds, cross-legged, watching the dragon's slow breathing. He felt small but not insignificant, like a note in a song that didn't need to be louder to matter. "Rick," he murmured, "do you think it dreams?" Rick looked up at the creature, eyes softer than Morty had ever seen.
"I think it dreams us, Morty." The dragon's tail shifted slightly, curling in a slow arc that brushed against the stars.
Its scales shimmered through every color of the dawn, lavender, amber, silver, before returning to calm gold. "Your journey is ending," it said. but the peace you've touched will echo through the spaces you leave behind. Morty's voice broke a little. Will we see you again?
Every time you breathe without hurry, Rick exhaled quietly. Almost a laugh, almost a sigh.
Guess that's our homework then. The dragon's eyes closed again, the glow fading back into the rhythm of sleep. The sky dimmed around it, clouds settling into their slow drift. The narrator whispered. The stars held their breath as the dragon sank deeper into dreaming. A dream that hummed through every corner of the cosmos, softening even the coldest equations. Morty leaned against Rick's shoulder, eyelids drooping.
I think I get it now, he murmured. Rick didn't answer.
He just placed a hand gently on Morty's head, the closest thing to comfort he knew how to give. The dragon's breathing grew slower still. The field dimmed until only faint starlight remained. The entire world seemed to sigh, and then the voice came again, just one last whisper, barely heard, as if spoken inside the heart rather than the ear. Sleep now, little wanderers. The peace you sought has found you. The narrator's closing words drifted like wind over quiet hills. And so they rested, a scientist and a boy in the golden hum of a sleeping dragon. The night did not end.
It simply softened into forever. The morning after meeting the dragon did not come with sunlight.
It arrived instead as a pale shimmer, a kind of quiet brightness that didn't belong to any hour. Rick and Morty still sat in the same place, on that endless field of sleeping clouds. But something had changed. The air itself felt slower, denser, as if every sound had been wrapped in velvet. The dragon remained coiled in the sky's center, its vast form now dimmed to a gentle amber glow. Each breath it took rippled through the air like waves across a still pond. Morty blinked slowly, barely daring to move. Rick,
he whispered, is it gone?
Rick rubbed his eyes, voice husky. Nah, just dreaming louder. The narrator's voice entered softly, steady as a pulse. When the extraordinary becomes gentle, that's when you know it's real. For a while, they sat in silence.
Only the low hum of the dragon's breath filled the air.
Then a flicker of gold light rose from its chest, small at first, then growing, spiraling upward, like a single ember escaping from a sleeping fire. It hovered above them, pulsing faintly. Morty squinted.
Rick? Is that supposed to happen?
Rick watched it carefully.
I think that's a gift. The glowing ember drifted closer.
It wasn't fire. It was softer, more like warm air given shape, or a piece of sunlight that had learned to float. Morty reached out his hand, hesitating for a moment before the light touched his fingers. Instantly, warmth spread through him. Not heat, but peace. His heartbeat slowed. His breath matched the rhythm of the dragon's. In that moment, every fear, every echo of panic, every question he didn't have words for, fell quiet. He whispered, Rick.
It feels like...
Like it's saying rest. Rick didn't answer right away. He simply watched the glow reflect in Morty's eyes, a softness he'd never seen there before. Maybe that's what we were supposed to find, Rick said quietly.
Not treasure, not knowledge, just stillness. The narrator's tone grew slower, more melodic, a voice that seemed to breathe with the characters. Some gifts can't be held, only felt.
Some treasures are too gentle for hands. The light lingered in Morty's palms, then divided, half of it floating toward Rick. It brushed against his chest, just above his heart, then sank inside like water, soaking into earth. Rick inhaled sharply, caught off guard. His body relaxed instantly, the tension he always carried in his shoulders dissolving. For the first time in what felt like years, he smiled, not the crooked, sarcastic smirk Morty knew, but something real, small, tired, and true. Morty stared wide-eyed. "Rick, you're smiling?" Rick exhaled through his nose, chuckling softly. "Don't get used to it, kid." But the smile didn't fade. Around them, the golden glow began to dissolve into smaller lights. Thousands of tiny motes drifting outward like seeds on the wind. Each one carried a fragment of warmth, vanishing into the horizon. Morty watched them go, his voice hushed. "Where do you think they're going?" Rick leaned back on his hands, eyes tracing the golden trail. "Maybe to everyone who forgot what peace feels like." The dragon shifted slightly in its sleep, a long, slow breath escaping its enormous lungs. The world hummed in response, like a string being plucked in the distance. The narrator whispered,
almost reverently, and the gift was given, not to two travelers alone,
but to everything that had ever wished for quiet. Morty sat cross-legged again, still staring at the soft glow surrounding them. "Rick, I don't think I want to wake up from this." Rick looked over at him, the corners of his eyes soft, tired, proud.
"Maybe you don't have to. Maybe that's the point." They stayed there, saying nothing more.
The air thickened with calm. Even the wind seemed too drowsy to move. For a long while, it felt like time had stopped. Or maybe time had simply decided it didn't need to hurry anymore. Rick eventually pulled a small, cracked flask from his coat, took a sip, and handed it to Morty. "Don't tell anyone," he murmured. Morty took it, sniffed, and smiled faintly.
"It smells like cinnamon."
Rick shrugged. "Multiversal whiskey. Aged in the same barrel as regret," Morty chuckled, the sound light and sleepy. He passed it back, then lay down on the clouds, folding his hands under his head. The surface felt warm, pulsing faintly with the same rhythm as the dragon's heart. The narrator spoke again, each word slower than the last. "Rest finds those who stop searching for it, and in the soft hush of a sleeping sky, even the restless can breathe easy." Morty closed his eyes. The world felt far away now, the chaos, the noise, the constant running. All he heard was Rick's steady breathing beside him and the distant hum of the dragon. In that silence, something inside him changed, not loudly, but deeply. He whispered, without opening his eyes, "Thanks for bringing me, Rick." Rick didn't reply at first. His gaze was fixed on the horizon where the last bits of golden light were fading into the sky. Finally, in a voice softer than anyone had ever heard from him, he said, "Yeah, kid, thanks for coming." The dragon's tail stirred faintly in the distance, brushing through the clouds like a painter's brushstroke. The air shimmered, and for a heartbeat, Morty thought he could hear a melody. Faint, wordless, but full of peace. The narrator breathed the moment alive with gentle awe. No prophecy, no battle, just a quiet exchange between the lost and the found. Rick leaned back and closed his eyes, letting his body sink into the soft glow of the clouds. For once there was nothing left to fix, nothing left to understand. Just breath, his and Morty's. Slow, matching, steady. The sky dimmed further, until only faint gold dust remained. The dragon's breathing slowed until it became part of the wind itself, invisible, endless. And as the last motes of light vanished, a whisper echoed across the dreamlike air. "The greatest invention
is peace." The narrator's voice softened into a near whisper, as if closing a lullaby. And so the dragon slept again, carrying the small warmth of two wanderers across 1,000 stars.
The scientist dreamed without guilt. The boy dreamed without fear. And somewhere between them, the universe learned how to breathe. The world awoke in whispers, not loud ones, not like the noise of engines or alarms, but like wind through tall grass, or the sigh of oceans remembering shorelines? Rick stirred first. His eyes opened slowly, lids heavy, gaze soft. The clouds beneath him pulsed faintly, breathing light instead of air. Morty still slept beside him, curled up like someone who had finally found rest after running too long. Rick looked toward the horizon. The dragon was gone.
Not vanished, just
Dissolved. Its golden traces had scattered into the air, becoming a shimmer that lingered in everything. The sky, the clouds, even the hum of his ship in the distance, all seemed touched by it. He stood, stretching, and for once the motion didn't creak with exhaustion. The air around him felt warmer, almost familiar. Morty stirred. Rick!
Is it morning?
Rick exhaled softly.
Not exactly.
Just feels like one. The narrator's voice drifted in like fog across water. Calm, reverent. Morning doesn't always mean sunlight. Sometimes it's the quiet realization that something inside you has healed. Morty rubbed his eyes and sat up, blinking. Did we do it? Did we find the dragon's piece? Rick didn't answer right away. He looked around, eyes scanning the endless sky as if trying to find something he couldn't name. Then he nodded slowly. Yeah, kid.
I think it found us. The portal gun sat beside him, dimly glowing.
Its edges shimmered faintly, the same gold that had touched them both. Rick picked it up and turned it over in his hand. The dials no longer hummed with their usual chaotic energy. Instead, they pulsed in slow, rhythmic beats. Morty watched curiously. What's it doing? Rick smiled faintly.
Sinking to peace. I guess even machines know when it's time to rest. They shared a small, wordless laugh, the kind that fades into the air like smoke.
Then Rick pointed toward a distant, swirling shimmer. It wasn't a portal exactly, but something softer, then like a window made of memory.
Its edges curved gently, breathing instead of flickering. That, Rick said, is our way home. The narrator's voice slowed.
As if time itself were moving with the travelers. Every journey begins in noise and ends in quiet. The return isn't a rewind, it's a soft exhale. They started walking. The clouds beneath their feet solidified slightly, forming a path that glowed faintly under each step. Morty looked around, watching the sky breathe and shift. Every few feet he saw shapes moving in the mist, echoes of the worlds they had crossed. A gentle light shaped like laughter passed by them, rippling with golden color. Then came another, a blue shimmer that hummed like forgiveness. Each world, once strange and wild, now seemed smaller, calmer. Morty pointed.
Hey, that's the place where we met that old lady, the dragon keeper. Look, Rick!
Rick smiled softly. Yeah, she's part of this too. All of it's connected. The dragon, her, us. Everything just keeps circling back. They stepped through a field of suspended sparks, each one a frozen moment of wonder. Morty reached out to touch one, and the air filled with the sound of his own laughter from earlier. It wasn't loud, just soft, like remembering a childhood joke. Whoa, it's like the worlds remember us, Morty whispered. Rick adjusted his coat, half smiling. Or maybe we're just finally remembering them. The narrator's tone grew even gentler now, like a lullaby fading into silence. Memory is a kind of home. It doesn't hold walls or doors, only echoes. And sometimes echoes are enough. They approached the shimmering doorway. Up close, it looked like it was made of the night sky itself. Small stars moving slowly inside it, as if stirred by an invisible hand. The glow reflected in Morty's eyes, filling them with soft gold. Rick looked down at him. You ready, kid? Morty nodded. Yeah, but...
Can we just...
Wait a second. Rick tilted his head. For what? Morty smiled faintly.
Just to remember how this feels.
The quiet, the...
Not rushing anywhere. Rick looked at him for a long moment.
Then, with a rare tenderness, he said, Good idea. They both sat down at the edge of the portal, legs dangling over the glowing mist. Morty leaned back on his hands, eyes on the stars that seemed to pulse in slow rhythm. Rick stared straight ahead, watching how the horizon seemed to melt into infinity. The silence stretched, not empty, but full. Full of every word they didn't need to say. Morty whispered, "Do you think we'll forget this?" Rick chuckled quietly.
Maybe, but the forgetting's part of it.
Peace isn't something you hold on to, Morty. It's something that visits. The narrator's tone deepened, like a low hum of wind. Even peace has wings. It lands softly, stays briefly, then leaves behind a trace of warmth where it once rested. Morty closed his eyes.
I hope it visits again. Rick looked down at him, voice barely above a whisper.
It always does, kid. It always does. The shimmer of the door brightened slightly, reacting to their words.
It pulsed gently, one beat for each breath they took.
Rick sighed, standing up and brushing his coat. All right, sleepyhead. Time to go home. Morty stood too, still looking up.
Home's gonna feel weird after this, Rick grinned.
Good. Weird's how you know you're alive. They stepped forward together. As they passed through the dreaming door, the world didn't spin or flash. It sighed. The sound was soft and endless, like exhaling after a long day. On the other side, stars unfolded again. Not bright, not loud, but calm, like candlelight at the edge of memory. The hum of their ship reached them from afar, steady and familiar. Morty turned back one last time, just as the door began to fade.
Hey, Rick, yeah?
Do you think the dragon's still sleeping out there somewhere? Rick smiled, eyes half closed.
Yeah, somewhere between galaxies.
Maybe keeping the universe's dreams safe. The narrator's voice, low and steady, drifted in. Some guardians are made of fire.
Others are made of stillness, and some
are simply made of love disguised as quiet. The light of the door faded completely, leaving only the hum of their ship and the vast, starlit calm. Rick set a hand on Morty's shoulder, guiding him toward the hatch. As they climbed aboard, the stars outside shifted, not dramatically, but enough that the air itself seemed to breathe, and somewhere, far behind them, the dragon turned once in its sleep, curling deeper into the clouds of peace it had made. Rick looked at Morty and murmured, "Let's go home."
Kid. The narrator closed the chapter like a sigh at the end of a long dream. And so they returned, not to where they began, but to who they had become.
Carrying light not in their hands, but in the quiet between their hearts. The hum of the portal faded like a dream dissolving into morning. Rick's garage materialized around them, cluttered, quiet, exactly as they had left it. Yet somehow
different.
The air smelled of metal, oil, and a faint trace of ozone. Dust hung motionless in the beams of light filtering through the blinds. Morty blinked a few times, as if trying to readjust to gravity itself. The floor beneath his sneakers felt heavier now, more real than the soft clouds of the dream world they had crossed. Rick tossed his portal gun onto the workbench with a dull clatter. It landed beside a pile of tools, cracked test tubes, and a single notebook half buried under blueprints. The familiar chaos of the garage seemed almost comforting. The mess, the low hum of machinery, the smell of half-finished ideas. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was thick, filled with the strange dissonance that comes when you return from somewhere far beyond what words can hold. Morty finally broke it.
So we're really back, huh?
Rick didn't look up. He was already rummaging through drawers, pulling out wires and circuit boards with the absent-minded focus of someone avoiding thought. Yep, multiversal coordinates confirm it. Same garage, same planet, same everything. Morty watched him for a while. You don't sound happy about it, Rick grunted softly. Happiness is just a side effect of ignorance, Morty. and I'm feeling way too aware right now." The narrator's voice slipped in, calm and measured. "Some returns are louder than departures. When the world stands still, it's not always peace you feel. Sometimes it's the weight of remembering." Morty wandered to the other side of the room. The glow from one of Rick's machines cast slow-moving shadows across the walls. He saw the reflection of his own face in a hanging glass beaker. Faint, distorted, older somehow. He whispered, "It's weird."
I thought I'd miss that other place more. But it's like part of it's still here. Rick stopped working for a moment, his back still turned. "That's how it works, kid. You don't bring back the place. You bring back the quiet it gave you."
The words hung in the air, almost like a sigh. Morty sat on a stool near the workbench, watching as Rick began adjusting the portal gun's internal wiring. Sparks flickered, briefly lighting his face. For the first time in a long while, Rick's eyes didn't look manic. They looked thoughtful. "Hey, Rick, yeah? Do you ever get tired of it? The portals, the science, the constant running?" Rick paused. The question seemed to hit a nerve, but not a sharp one. More like a memory you touch and realize it still aches. He turned slowly, leaning on the bench. "I get tired of pretending I don't," he said softly. Morty looked up, surprised. Rick almost never spoke like that. Without armor, without sarcasm. Rick continued, his tone quieter now. "You spend enough time chasing meaning through universes, and eventually you realize it's not out there."
"It's in here." He tapped his chest gently. "And it scares the hell out of me every time." The narrator's voice followed like a calm tide rolling in. "Even the greatest travelers are haunted by stillness. For those who run too far, home is not a location. It's a lesson waiting to be learned."
Morty smiled faintly. "That's actually kind of deep, Rick." Rick scoffed playfully. "Don't get used to it. The sentimental circuits only activate once every few decades." They shared a laugh, small, fragile, but real. After a moment, Morty stood and wandered over to one of Rick's older inventions, a cracked helmet connected to a jar of liquid light. He tilted his head. "What was this one for?" Rick looked up. "That? Oh, that's an old dream collector. Tried to harvest people's subconscious to map emotional frequency patterns across dimensions." Morty blinked. "Did it work?" Rick smiled faintly. "Once, then it started collecting mine instead." The narrator's voice lowered. "Some machines are built to measure, others accidentally reveal. The ones that show us ourselves are often the hardest to shut off." Rick reached out, pressing a button on the helmet. The jar flickered, releasing a soft, golden light. Inside, faint images appeared, fragments of what looked like clouds, stars, and the outline of a massive sleeping dragon. Morty gasped quietly. That's from the dreaming door." Rick nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, guess not everything stays behind." They both stood in silence, watching as the image pulsed gently before fading away. Morty whispered, "It's beautiful." Rick smiled weakly. "Beauty's just the universe's way of apologizing for chaos." Morty tilted his head. "You really think that?" Rick's gaze softened. "Nah. I think beauty's what happens when you finally stop trying to fix the chaos." The words settled into the air like dust illuminated by sunlight. The garage felt warmer now, not because of any machine or heater, but because it was filled with something unseen.
A stillness, almost like the hum of peace that had followed them back. Morty walked toward the door leading to the house. "I think I'm going to get some sleep. Real sleep this time," Rick nodded. "Go on, kid. You earned it." As Morty left, Rick stayed behind, sitting down heavily at his bench.
The machines around him blinked and buzzed in gentle rhythm. He took a deep breath, letting the quiet wrap around him. For a long while, he just sat there, eyes half closed. Then, slowly, he reached for the notebook buried under blueprints. He brushed the dust away, revealing a title scrawled across the front. Project Seraphim, The Science of Stillness. Rick smiled faintly. Guess even I can learn something new. The narrator returned, softer than ever. And so the scientist who conquered 1,000 worlds sat still in one. Not because he was lost, but because he was finally found. Rick leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. The faint hum of the portal gun echoed in the background, pulsing slowly, almost like a heartbeat. Outside, the night deepened, stars blinking gently through the cracked window. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the faintest echo of a dragon's breath, far, far away. Rick murmured to himself, voice drowsy. Maybe peace isn't something you find, Morty. Maybe it's something that finds you. When you finally stop looking. His eyes closed, the machines dimmed, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, the garage fell completely silent. The narrator whispered the closing line as if tucking the story itself into bed. The greatest journey is not through space or time, but into the quiet corners of our own hearts, where even the wildest minds can finally rest. The garage was still wrapped in midnight's quiet glow. Machines hummed faintly, the air smelled of metal and ozone, and the faint vibration of a dormant universe seemed to echo between the walls. Outside, crickets sang to the stars, their rhythm soft and even, the world, for once, in no hurry. Rick sat in his recliner, head tilted back, a half-finished flask resting on his chest. His breathing was steady, slow, almost gentle. The light from the ceiling flickered slightly, casting a halo of blue around his silver hair. On the workbench. Beside him lay pages filled with equations, some crossed out, some simply trailed off into small doodles of stars. Morty stirred in the corner, curled up under a blanket. He had fallen asleep watching the last flickers of a portal fade into nothing. And now he murmured softly, lost in the drifting current of dreams. The narrator's voice entered like a breeze. Through an open window, peace doesn't always arrive with silence. Sometimes it hums through the gears and wires, through the notes of unfinished ideas. Sometimes even a scientist dreams. Rick's eyelids fluttered. The garage shimmered around him. But now it wasn't the same. The clutter had vanished. The shelves were neat. The light above him glowed like the surface of the moon. He realized, slowly, that he was dreaming. He was standing before a chalkboard. The equations written there glowed faintly, like constellations drawn in white fire. Each number pulsed with warmth. Rick picked up a piece of chalk, turning it over in his hand. "Well, subconscious," he muttered, "what impossible theorem do you want me to solve tonight?" The numbers shifted on their own, rearranging like gentle waves. Symbols turned into words. Words turned into sounds. The sounds became music. A soft, harmonic hum. Not mechanical, not alien, but something human. It wasn't the harsh noise of plasma drives or portal energy. It was something quieter. Rick took a step closer. The equations began to breathe. Every formula he'd ever written for teleportation, molecular splitting, dark matter stabilization, now melted into melody. He could hear the mathematics. and beneath it all was something that felt familiar, something like comfort. He frowned, overwhelmed. "This isn't physics," he whispered. "This is peace." The narrator spoke softly, the tone slow and hypnotic. When a restless mind dreams, it doesn't search for knowledge. It searches for stillness. An answer not written in ink, but in feeling. Rick reached out and touched one glowing symbol. The moment his finger brushed it, he was no longer in the garage. He was floating, weightless, in a space filled with pale, luminous mist. It stretched endlessly, yet felt enclosed, like the inside of a thought. Shapes began to appear around him, fragments of memories, faint and flickering. The laughter of a young Beth, the gleam of a first invention, the soft hum of a lullaby his mother once played when he couldn't sleep. He stood in silence, the edges of his lips trembling between a smirk and something gentler. Guess even my brain's got a sentimental streak. From within the mist came a low, resonant sound, not words, but meaning, a voice he couldn't place, familiar yet infinite. "You built machines to escape chaos, but what if the formula for peace was always the simplest one?" Rick chuckled weakly. "Oh yeah? Let me guess. Friendship, love, gratitude? Tried 'em. They don't hold up under pressure." The mist shimmered in reply, forming an image of Morty, asleep, smiling faintly, wrapped in a blanket. The warmth of it hit Rick harder than he expected. The voice whispered again, "Not everything that works needs to last forever. Sometimes peace exists only in the moment you allow it to." Rick swallowed, his throat tight. He wanted to laugh, but the sound didn't come out.
Instead, he looked at Morty's sleeping shape within the vision. The rise and fall of his chest, the gentle way his fingers twitched as he dreamed. He whispered, "Kid's smarter than he knows, maybe. Smarter than me." The mist began to dissolve.
The luminous symbols returned, spiraling slowly around him like glowing snow. As they fell, they turned into fragments of equations again, each one simpler than the last, until only one remained. A single line written in soft golden light, E. Cheek rest. Rick stared at it for a long moment. "That's it," he muttered. "That's the big secret?" But the longer he looked, the more he understood. The universe wasn't made to be conquered. It was made to be understood through stillness. He felt a wave of warmth move through his chest. The chalkboard, the mist, the stars, all began to blur. The narrator returned, voice deep and serene. For a man who built 1,000 universes, the greatest creation would be the one that required no invention, only acceptance. When Rick opened his eyes again, he was back in the garage. The hum of the machines greeted him softly. The faint glow of a lamp painted warm gold across the workbench. Morty was still asleep, curled up, breathing in rhythm with the flickering lights. Rick looked at the notebook on his lap. He flipped through pages of formulas until he found a blank one. He picked up his pen and, for the first time in years, wrote something not meant to be tested, but remembered. Peace, time, plus trust, minus control. He stared at it, smiled faintly, and then crossed it out. Below it, he wrote instead, "Peace. Whatever lets you sleep tonight." The hum of the machines grew softer. The air thickened with calm. Rick leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. Outside, the stars shimmered faintly through the cracked garage window. The night had grown quieter still, as if even the multiverse was holding its breath, listening to the slow rhythm of Rick's rest. The narrator's voice lowered into a whisper. The mind that never stops can learn to dream again. Equations fade, blueprints decay, but the softest formula remains, the one written not in numbers, but in the heartbeat between thoughts. Rick smiled in his sleep. The last sound he heard before drifting off was the faint hum of the portal gun syncing with his breath. A steady pulse, like a lullaby built from logic and love, and as the night deepened, even the stars seemed to dim slightly. Not in sorrow, but in solidarity, as though the cosmos itself, just this once, decided to rest with him. The night stretched endlessly across the sky, quiet and silver like the breath between heartbeats. In Rick's garage, everything had fallen still. The hum of inventions, the flicker of plasma tools, even the faint whir of cosmic engines. All had gone silent, as if the universe itself was listening. Morty slept at the desk, his head resting on crossed arms. The glow of a half-finished portal gun painted green halos around his face. Rick, slumped back in his chair, was lost in his own dream, a faint smile tugging at the edge of his lips. The air shimmered faintly, soft as the underside of a whisper. The narrator's voice entered like moonlight through a window. There comes a night in every world when everything rests. Not because it is tired, but because it finally feels safe. Outside, the stars pulsed slower than usual. The constellations dimmed one by one like lanterns gently covered by invisible hands. Beyond the thin veil of atmosphere, entire galaxies seemed to sigh. Supernovas delayed their explosions. Black holes quieted their hunger. Every system in the infinite sprawl of space began to slow, as though the multiverse, vast and ancient, was finally exhaling. Somewhere in that infinite dark, a tiny comet turned lazily, no longer racing. Planets rotated at half their usual speed. Even time, that ever-impatient traveler, seemed to pause to rest its weary feet. Morty stirred. His eyelids fluttered, but he didn't wake. In his dream, he floated through a sea of stars, each one blinking softly in rhythm with his heartbeat. He saw worlds made of glass and oceans that hummed lullabies. He saw the dragon from his earlier dreams, vast and quiet, sleeping in a cradle of light. Its scales rose and fell with the rhythm of creation. Rick was there too, not the sharp, cynical Rick of daylight hours, but a gentler reflection, a man without the weight of genius pressing down on him. He floated nearby, coat drifting like mist. His eyes were closed, and his expression was unguarded. Morty reached toward him, his voice echoing softly through the dream.
Rick, are we still in the adventure?
Rick didn't answer, not with words. Instead, the dragon stirred, and a wave of golden light passed through them both. The narrator whispered, "There are adventures that take you to distant galaxies, and then there are adventures that take you home to yourself." The light expanded until there was no difference between the stars, the dragon, Rick, or Morty. All merged into one soft, breathing universe back in the real world, or what passed for it. The garage lights dimmed automatically. The machines sensed the absence of movement and entered rest mode. The faint blinking of buttons became slower, calmer, almost like the slow inhale and exhale of sleep. Rick's fingers twitched slightly. He mumbled something under his breath, a half-sentence, maybe a formula, maybe a dream.
Energy equal to rest.
The words dissolved into a sigh. The narrator continued, slower now, the rhythm hypnotic. Imagine, for a moment, that every star in the sky is a thought, that every flicker of light is something you once worried about. Now imagine those thoughts quieting one by one.
Not gone, just resting.
Just waiting for morning. Beyond the walls of the garage, the world was blanketed in soft silver light. The street outside was empty.
Even the wind had calmed, its usual chatter replaced by gentle stillness.
Somewhere, a leaf drifted down from a tree and landed soundlessly on the driveway. Time passed differently now.
Minutes didn't feel like minutes.
They were slow waves rising and falling, soothing the universe into rhythm. Inside Morty's dream, he found himself standing on a hill of glass beneath a sky that rippled like water. He looked down and saw reflections, millions of them, of himself, Rick, Summer, even versions of worlds he didn't remember living in. All the reflections were asleep, each breathing softly, each shining faintly. He felt calm, almost weightless. "It's like the whole universe is dreaming," he murmured. From somewhere in the distance, a voice answered, warm and familiar. It always was.
"Morty, we just keep waking up too soon," he turned.
And there was Rick again. Not his usual self, but the quiet version. The one who existed between moments of brilliance and sorrow. Rick reached out and tapped Morty gently on the forehead. "You're doing fine, kid." The trick isn't staying awake. The trick's learning how to rest without falling apart. The stars above them pulsed brighter, then softened again, fading into a gentle, endless twilight. The narrator returned, almost whispering now, "If you could listen close enough, you'd hear it. The heartbeat of galaxies slowing, the cosmic lullaby beneath every atom."
Even chaos dreams when it's tired enough. The dream began to dissolve into mist.
Morty felt the pull of gravity again, gentle and familiar. The hill faded, the stars dimmed, and soon he was back in the garage, half awake, eyes still heavy. Rick hadn't moved. His breathing was steady, the faintest smile still on his face. The portal gun flickered once, then turned off completely, its last green light vanishing into the dark. Morty watched it for a moment before whispering, "Good night, universe." The garage answered only with silence, a deep, kind silence, the kind that holds rather than empties. The narrator's final words floated like mist.
Measured and slow, maybe peace isn't the absence of noise,
but the knowing that the noise can stop when it needs to. Maybe even universes need to close their eyes sometimes, and then, in the vast, soft dark of space, galaxies dimmed in perfect sequence. World by world, light by light, everything that ever was began to breathe together. One great, silent heartbeat of rest. From far beyond, where thought becomes starlight and starlight becomes sleep, a final whisper passed through creation. "Shh.
It's okay now.
You can rest too." The wind settled. The air grew warm. Rick's hand slipped from his chair, fingers grazing the cold floor. Morty's head tilted slightly, the faint smile of dreamers spreading across his lips. Outside, dawn waited patiently beyond the horizon. But it would not arrive yet. For tonight, the multiverse slept. Morning didn't arrive with sunlight. It came instead as a slow fade of darkness, the kind that feels more like a sigh than a sunrise. The stars still lingered outside, reluctant to leave. Their soft shimmer lay across the garage window, tinting everything in silver blue. Morty was the first to stir. He blinked once, twice, then sat up slowly as if waking from a century of sleep. His head still hummed with fragments of dreams, drifting images of dragons, glowing constellations, and Rick's faint laughter echoing through endless skies. The air smelled faintly of metal and stardust. Somewhere in the corner, the portal gun lay quiet, its lights dim but steady like the last ember of a dying campfire. Rick was still asleep in his chair, one hand over his eyes, the other dangling loosely at his side. His chest rose and fell in rhythm with the faint hum of the multiverse engine, a heartbeat sinking with infinity. Morty watched him for a while. He didn't speak. He just breathed in the quiet, the way you breathe in the sea before a tide turns. "He looks peaceful," Morty whispered. Though no one was there to hear him, the narrator's voice flowed in like warm wind through an open window. Sometimes the moments that change us the most are the ones where nothing happens at all. Morty stood up and wandered toward the window. The world outside was still wrapped in early twilight, half night, half dawn. The sky had that pale, soft glow that comes just before morning truly begins. He could see their ship parked in the distance, half covered in dew, its surface reflecting the faint shimmer of fading stars. It looked smaller now, like something from a dream he could barely remember. As Morty leaned against the glass, he began to think about the dragon, about what it said, or maybe what it didn't say. He remembered its breath, warm and golden, wrapping around him like sunlight filtered through water. "I was never lost. You were just awake too long." Those words echoed in him now, not as sound, but as something softer, a knowing. The narrator whispered, "Perhaps peace isn't something we find, but something we stop running from." Morty smiled faintly. He could almost feel that truth. For the first time in a long while, he didn't want to rush off to the next thing. He didn't want to fix or build or prove.
He just wanted to be. He turned to look at Rick again.
The old man was still sleeping, face half lit by the soft glow of a desk lamp. The lines of his face, usually etched with exhaustion and defiance, seemed gentler now. Without the weight of invention and irony, Rick just looked human. Morty wondered how long it had been since Rick really slept. Not the kind of sleep that just resets your body, but the kind that lets your soul breathe again. He sat back down at the desk, tracing his fingers along the cool metal surface. Scattered blueprints covered the table, old plans, half-drawn equations, little scribbles that probably meant something to Rick, but looked like strange constellations to him. Among them, Morty found a scrap of paper where something small folded once, then twice. He opened it carefully. It wasn't a formula. It wasn't a plan. It was a list, just 5 words. Scrawled in Rick's messy handwriting, peace, not needing control. Morty stared at it for a long moment, his chest tightening with something he couldn't quite name. He folded it back up and tucked it into his pocket. The narrator's voice lowered to a hush, almost reverent. Sometimes wisdom isn't taught. It's simply found, written quietly in the spaces between exhaustion and rest. Morty leaned back in the chair beside Rick's and tilted his head toward the ceiling. He could still feel that golden breath of the dragon somewhere deep inside his chest. A warmth that didn't fade even as the dream ended. He whispered to himself.
Barely audible. Maybe it was never really about the dragon.
Maybe it was about us. The hum of the garage seemed to answer. Not with words, but with a low, comforting vibration, as if the world itself agreed. Outside, dawn began to bloom, not bright or loud, but softly. Pinks blending into violets, gold diffusing through blue. The kind of morning that doesn't break the night, but gently convinces it to let go. Morty turned his gaze upward. Somewhere far above, galaxies still slept.
Maybe they'd always been sleeping.
Maybe they'd never stopped. And yet, something inside him had changed. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, but certain, like a door had opened inside his heart, letting the wind pass through without resistance. He took a slow breath, feeling it all the way to his fingertips. "I think I get it now," he murmured. "It's not about winning or fixing things.
It's about
learning how to rest." Rick stirred at that, his voice gravelly but soft. "You're finally getting it, kid." Morty blinked. Rick hadn't opened his eyes. He was still half asleep, speaking from that space between dreaming and waking. Rick's voice drifted like smoke. You stop fighting everything.
And suddenly it stops fighting you back. Then he smiled faintly and went quiet again. Morty felt tears sting his eyes. Not from sadness,
But from something purer, older, gratitude maybe, or just love in its simplest form. He whispered, "Thanks, Rick." The narrator spoke, gentle as a lullaby. It takes courage to rest. It takes strength to be still. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is forgive the part of you that kept running. Morty sat there until the sun rose fully. The first sunlight in days streaming across the garage floor. Dust floated through the beams like tiny golden planets. For a moment, everything was perfect. Not because it made sense, but because it didn't need to. The narrator closed softly. And so Morty learned what most travelers never do, that the greatest adventure isn't the one that takes you farthest, but the one that lets you finally come home. Morty smiled, slow, sleepy, real. He reached out and turned off the desk lamp, leaving only the warm,
natural light of morning. He whispered one last thing. Not to Rick.
not to the dragon, not even to himself, but to the world. It's okay now. I can rest. And the multiverse, ever gentle, ever patient, seemed to whisper back in the soft hum of morning, "Yes, Morty, you can." Rick woke before the sun finished rising. The world was tinted in that pale, early light that makes everything look softer, even the mess of his garage. The shadows stretched long across the floor, bending over wires, metal scraps, and blueprints, all frozen in the hush of morning. For a moment, he didn't move. His eyes stayed half open, watching dust drift lazily in a sunbeam that had slipped through the cracked blinds. Each speck turned and shimmered like a tiny planet. He thought of how many worlds he'd seen, and how none of them ever felt quite as peaceful as this one, right here in the silence between breaths. Morty was still asleep beside him, head tilted back in the chair, mouth slightly open, breathing slow. Rick studied him quietly, the faintest trace of a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Kid's finally resting," he murmured under his breath. He turned away before the warmth in his chest could spread too much. He wasn't used to that kind of feeling, the kind that didn't demand a fix, a solution, or a drink. Just stillness. Just being. Rick reached for the flask in his coat pocket, uncapped it, and stared into it. Empty. He almost smirked. "Figures," he said, but for once he didn't refill it. He set it aside. The sound of it clicking gently against the metal table echoed like punctuation. A small, final note at the end of a long sentence. The narrator's voice entered softly, calm and low, almost like the morning wind. He'd spent lifetimes searching for something to fill the spaces inside him. But now, for reasons he couldn't explain, those spaces didn't feel so empty anymore. Rick stood and stretched his back with a tired grunt. His lab coat brushed against the floor as he moved toward the door. The sound of his footsteps, uneven, heavy, yet rhythmic, was the only thing breaking the stillness. Outside, the yard was wrapped in dew. Each blade of grass glimmered with droplets catching the first touch of sunlight. The air smelled like rain and burnt circuits. Rick breathed in deeply, the cold air filling his chest. He could hear birds, faint, cautious. He'd forgotten that mornings had their own kind of music. He looked toward the ship, sitting still under a thin blanket of mist. "You look tired too," he muttered, as if speaking to it. For once, the idea of fixing it didn't feel urgent. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly slumped, not in defeat, but in quiet surrender, the kind that comes after too many storms. The narrator whispered, "Peace isn't the absence of noise.
It's the decision to stop fighting it." Rick thought about all the noise he'd made across the galaxies, the chaos, the inventions, the sharp words said to people he loved more than he'd ever admit.
Every mistake still hummed somewhere inside him like a machine that wouldn't shut off. But this morning, something was different. It wasn't silence he felt. It was balance. He glanced back at the window. Morty's reflection shimmered there, still sleeping. The sight softened him, that fragile, unguarded trust. He'd spent so long teaching Morty to survive in a world full of impossible things. But maybe the real lesson had always been the opposite. Maybe it was how to rest without fear. He took out his tiny hollow recorder, the one he used for experiments and notes. But instead of formulas, he spoke quietly into it, almost as if afraid the universe might overhear. "Note to self," he said. "Sometimes not solving something is the solution." He paused, exhaled slowly, and ended the recording. The device flickered softly in his palm before dimming again. The sound of it powered down like a sigh, one he'd been holding for decades. Rick wandered to the edge of the porch, looking out over the pale morning sky. For a fleeting second he saw the dragon, just a silhouette fading into clouds. A memory, maybe, or something more. He didn't chase it. He just watched until it disappeared. "You can go now," he whispered. "We're good." A faint breeze brushed past his face, warm, deliberate, almost like an answer. The narrator murmured, he'd never been good at saying goodbye, so this time he didn't. He just let the moment drift through him, soft as breath. Rick sat down on the step, elbows on his knees, eyes half-lidded. The sunlight warmed his hair, his hands.
It touched his skin like forgiveness. He started to hum.
It was a small tune, uneven, improvised, but it had the rhythm of something familiar. A lullaby, maybe, from a place he no longer remembered. As he hummed, the morning seemed to hum back. The air, the light, even the faint mechanical whir from the garage all joined in the same quiet symphony. Morty stirred inside, muttering something in his sleep. A word Rick couldn't make out, but he smiled. He didn't need to. For once, everything made sense without being explained. He'd spent so long running from the quiet that when he finally stopped, it didn't scare him anymore.
It felt like home. Rick closed his eyes.
The sun was higher now, painting the clouds gold. He leaned back slightly and let his head rest against the wood of the porch. For the first time in years, his breathing matched the rhythm of the world. Slow. Even. Real. He whispered, half to himself.
"Half to the morning. Guess we made it through another night, huh?"
The wind carried his words away gently, scattering them like seeds. Somewhere far beyond the visible sky, the faint glimmer of the dragon's golden scales shimmered one last time. Not as farewell, but as promise. Rick didn't open his eyes. He didn't need to. He just smiled a rare, unguarded smile, the kind that comes from a peace you never thought you'd find. And so,
Rick, who had conquered galaxies, escaped time, and laughed at gods, found something greater than all of it.
a morning that asked nothing from him but presence, a silence that loved him back. The garage door creaked softly behind him. Morty's sleepy voice called out, "Hey, Rick." "You up?" Rick chuckled. "Been up. World doesn't stop just 'cause we do." Morty rubbed his eyes, smiling faintly. "Feels like it could, though." Rick looked at him for a long time, then nodded. "Yeah, maybe it could," the narrator whispered, fading like the last note of a lullaby. And for once, they didn't need to go anywhere. Rick leaned back again, eyes half closed, morning sunlight spilling across his face. He didn't plan the next invention, or the next escape, or the next infinite universe to conquer. He just sat there and let the day begin. The morning deepened into a calm, golden stillness. The sun had climbed higher now, turning the thin layer of mist into ribbons of light that swayed through the air. Rick sat quietly, eyes half open, watching dust and light mingle like two old friends. Morty came out of the garage, still rubbing his eyes, hair sticking in every direction. His yawn sounded almost like a sigh. "Man," he murmured, "it feels weirdly peaceful today." Rick didn't answer. He just nodded toward the sky, where faint traces of silver glimmered among the clouds. They both knew what it was, or maybe what it used to be. The faint shimmer of dragon scales stretched thin across the horizon like the memory of a dream. The narrator's voice entered softly. "Some things never truly leave. They just change shape until the world is ready to remember them." Rick stood, brushing dust from his coat. He looked at Morty, his expression unreadable, though his voice carried a gentleness that wasn't there before. "Come on, kid. Let's take one last look." They climbed into the ship, the familiar hum greeting them, quieter this time, like it too was waking from a dream. Rick pressed a few buttons, but for once didn't rush the sequence. Each sound, each flicker of light seemed to move with intention. "You sure about this?" Morty asked softly. "No," Rick replied, "but when has that stopped me before?" The ship lifted slowly, cutting through the mist. Beneath them, the house grew small, surrounded by the sleepy calm of morning.
As they rose higher, the clouds seemed to open, revealing the faint shimmer of something vast and golden above. Morty's breath caught.
"Rick, is that—" Rick didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the sky, where sunlight bent around invisible wings. The dragon appeared not as a creature now, but as light itself, an immense shape woven from warmth and memory. Its body spanned the horizon, translucent, glowing, pulsing in rhythm with the wind. The narrator's tone softened, almost like a lullaby. It wasn't flying anymore. It was resting, breathing with the world. Morty pressed his hand against the glass, eyes wide, full of wonder and sadness. "It's beautiful." Rick's jaw tightened. "Yeah, guess it was never about catching it." For a while, neither of them spoke. The hum of the engine became softer, the air around them slower, denser, as if the universe itself wanted them to linger. Rick reached into his pocket and took out a small glass vial, glowing faintly from within.
Morty leaned closer. "What's that?" "Just—"
A little something it left behind. Inside the vial swirled a golden mist, not bright, not blinding, just softly alive. Rick turned it in his hand, watching the light move. "You know what it is?" Morty shook his head. Rick smiled faintly. "Peace, or something like it." The narrator whispered. He'd spent his life chasing meaning, only to find it waiting quietly in the smallest gesture. A glance, a breath, a silence that didn't need to end. Rick opened the vial. The air shimmered, and the golden mist rose like a sigh, curling gently toward the open sky. Morty watched, eyes glistening. "You're letting it go." "Didn't really belong to me, kid."
Never did. The mist floated higher, joining the light of the dragon until the two became indistinguishable.
For a brief, heart-stilling moment, the entire sky glowed. Not with brightness, but with calm. Morty whispered, "I'll miss it." Rick's voice dropped to almost nothing. "Yeah, me too." They stayed there, just floating, just watching. The sound of the ship faded under the vast hush of the world. Below them, the earth seemed to shimmer faintly, as if every living thing had paused to take one slow, collective breath. The narrator's tone softened even further. It's said that some journeys never end. They just quiet down, waiting for the right dream to find them again. Rick leaned back in his seat, eyes still on the horizon. You know, Morty, maybe this whole thing wasn't about finding peace. Maybe it was about realizing we already had it and just kept talking over it. Morty smiled sleepily, resting his head against the seat.
That sounds kind of smart, Rick. Rick chuckled softly.
Don't tell anyone. The laughter faded gently, replaced by silence, the kind that hums with meaning. Morty's breathing slowed. His eyelids fluttered. The ship drifted, suspended in soft golden light. Rick reached over and adjusted the navigation, not to travel anywhere, just to steady their hover. He looked at Morty again, asleep now, mouth slightly open, hair falling over his eyes. Rest up, kid, Rick said quietly. You earned it. The narrator spoke in the same tender rhythm as the hum of the ship. He didn't know where they'd go next. Maybe nowhere.
Maybe everywhere.
But for once it didn't matter. Rick leaned back, staring up at the canopy. Through the viewport, he saw one last flicker of golden scales fade into the sky, dissolving like memory into morning light. He whispered, almost to himself. See you out there! The wind brushed softly around the ship, echoing the sound of wings. For a long time, neither time nor thought seemed to move. The air hung thick with calm. Rick's eyes began to close. The narrator's voice slowed, drifting like the hush before sleep. The dragon wasn't gone. It had simply become the air, the warmth, the rhythm of the universe itself. A lullaby made of light and quiet. The ship's lights dimmed automatically, adjusting to the serenity of the skies. Rick's last thought was of Morty, sleeping beside him, and how small, ordinary moments could somehow feel eternal. He smiled faintly. The stars, just beginning to show again at the edge of the horizon, seemed to blink in rhythm with his breathing. Guess the universe figured out how to sleep too, he murmured. And with that, the ship drifted quietly through the golden calm. No destination, no rush, just the soft hum of existence itself. The narrator's closing words arrived like the gentlest whisper. And somewhere above a quiet planet, two travelers float beneath a sleeping sky, carrying nothing but peace. The last flight never ends. It only fades softly into dream. There was no sound at first, only the faint hum of the cosmos, like the softest whisper passing through silk. Rick drifted in half-sleep inside the ship, surrounded by light so still it almost felt like water. Morty's quiet breathing filled the space, a steady rhythm that matched the pulse of the stars beyond the window. Outside, the universe exhaled. Galaxies glowed like lanterns in a dark sea, their spirals turning slow as thought. Somewhere, a cluster of stars dimmed gently, as though bowing their heads. The narrator's voice softened into a lullaby-like tone. Sometimes the universe doesn't speak. It sighs, a long, slow breath that carries everything we've ever loved, lost, or longed for. Rick stirred slightly. His coat slipped from his shoulder. The ship hovered weightless above a planet he didn't recognize, yet somehow felt familiar, a blue-gray world that shimmered as if dreaming of light. Morty mumbled something in his sleep, a fragment of a dream, maybe a name. Rick glanced over, the faintest of smiles tugging at his mouth. "Sleep easy, kid," he murmured. "We made it through the night." He leaned back again, eyes half closed. For the first time in what felt like centuries, his mind wasn't racing. Equations didn't chase him. Guilt didn't call his name. Everything was quiet. And in that quiet, the universe seemed to hum with the same rhythm as his heartbeat. The narrator continued. It's strange how the mind, when finally at peace, becomes a mirror for the cosmos.
Every thought turns to light.
Every memory folds back into silence. Rick's vision blurred as fatigue pulled him under. But even in dreams, he felt the warmth of the ship around him, the hum of the engines blending with the lull of creation itself. In that dream space, he saw stars breathing, literally breathing, expanding and contracting with the rhythm of the galaxy's heart. Nebulae shimmered like slow tides. He reached out and felt the soft resistance of starlight against his fingertips, like touching the edge of a sleeping thought. The scene shifted. He was standing on a quiet hill beneath twin moons. The grass shimmered silver blue, moving in the breeze like an ocean. Morty stood beside him, gazing upward, eyes wide and calm. "Do you think the dragon's still up there?" Morty asked. Rick looked toward the sky. The clouds moved in slow, deliberate circles, forming patterns that seemed alive. Within them faint shapes glowed, like wings made of memory. "Yeah," Rick said softly, "but not in the way we think."
It's not out there, Morty. It's in everything that's still. The narrator added gently, peace is never lost.
It just hides behind noise, waiting for the moment the world remembers how to listen. Morty smiled faintly, his small figure silhouetted against the moonlight. "So it was never about catching it?" Rick chuckled, a low, raspy sound.
"No, kid.
It was about stopping long enough to realize it was already here." The grass rippled with quiet laughter, the kind that lives between sound and silence. Rick turned his head upward again and saw the stars pulsing in soft unison. For a moment he thought he could hear them breathing, slowly, gently.
In, out. It was the rhythm of everything. Galaxies, oceans, hearts, even the smallest particles seemed to sway with it. Rick closed his eyes and the world melted into light. The narrator whispered. In that breath, he felt it. The great.
Quiet. The endless calm that had always been just beneath the noise. The universe was alive, but not in motion. It was resting. He saw flashes of places they'd been, the old woman with scaled hands, the world of clouds and whales, the map of forgotten flames. Each memory drifted by like lanterns across still water. Each one glowed briefly, then dimmed. Not gone, just absorbed. Morty turned to him, eyes soft. "Do you think it ever really ends?" Rick shook his head. "Nah, it just changes shape." The words echoed, dissolving into air. The dream faded into a vast, shimmering horizon where no time existed. Just the steady pulse of cosmic breath. The narrator's tone slowed even more, syllables spaced like heartbeats. "You are breathing with the stars now. Each inhale, a galaxy forming. Each exhale, a world finding peace." Rick's mind drifted further, beyond thought, beyond memory. He saw infinite versions of himself scattered through the multiverse, all of them chasing, running, building, breaking. But in this single strand of reality, this quiet corner of existence, he was still. For the first time, he didn't need to fix anything. He didn't need to prove anything. He simply was. Morty's dream merged with his own. The dragon appeared again, no longer golden, no longer vast, but small and soft, curled up in Morty's hands like a sleeping cat. Its scales shimmered faintly with the light of every world they had passed through. Rick watched in silence as Morty cradled it gently. The dragon opened one eye, just a faint glimmer, and whispered, "All is well." Then it vanished into light. Rick's voice broke the silence, quiet as breath. "Yeah, it really is. The narrator's tone became so soft it was almost a sigh, and so the universe breathed again. One endless inhale of stars, one endless exhale of peace. The hum of the ship returned, blending perfectly with the cosmic rhythm. The walls glowed faintly, as if lit by the dream itself. Rick's breathing slowed to match Morty's. The sound of two hearts, steady and even, filled the space. Outside, galaxies turned slower, stars blinked softer, and all things seemed to fold inward, not collapsing, but resting. "Sleep," the narrator whispered, "because even universes need to dream." The ship drifted quietly into the infinite dusk. Two travelers, one dream, and a sky that had finally remembered how to breathe. The night was endless, but it didn't feel cold anymore. The ship floated gently through a sea of silver dust, its lights dimmed to a soft heartbeat glow. Outside, stars shimmered like quiet thoughts, each one breathing, pulsing, alive. Inside, the air was calm. Rick and Morty slept. The engines purred in the rhythm of the cosmos itself. The narrator's voice returned, slower now, like a whisper traveling through time. There comes a moment, at the edge of every journey, when the story doesn't end. It simply drifts away like smoke dissolving into the night sky. Rick's eyes opened slightly. The ceiling above him looked infinite, a canvas of faint blue shadows moving like waves. He sat up slowly, his movements weightless, as though gravity itself had decided to rest. He looked to his side. Morty was still asleep, his head resting on his arm, lips parted in quiet dream. Rick smiled faintly, that small, rare smile that came from somewhere deep. Not arrogance, not irony, just warmth. He stood, walked to the front of the ship, and looked out the viewport. There it was. The universe. The same, yet different. It looked slower now, like it was taking its time. Every star shimmered with quiet intent. Every swirl of light seemed to hum softly, and for the first time in his life, Rick felt that the cosmos wasn't chaos. It was peace, pretending to be chaos. He reached into his coat and pulled out a flask. He turned it in his hand, watched the light bend across its surface. Then he placed it gently on the console, unopened. "Not tonight," he whispered. "The stars deserve silence." The narrator's tone softened further. There are nights when even the loudest hearts learn how to rest, when even the restless find their stillness, and when the ones who could build worlds realize they don't need to anymore. Rick closed his eyes. The sound of the engines faded into a slow, melodic hum. He thought about every world they had visited, the ones that crumbled, the ones that bloomed. He thought about his mistakes, his triumphs, his absurd inventions that tore holes through space and time. And he thought about all the versions of himself that never found peace. Maybe this one finally had. The ship glided through a stretch of star mist, each droplet of light refracted like 1,000 tiny dreams suspended in air. It reminded him of something from his childhood, a night when he had stayed awake just to watch snow fall under a streetlight.
Quiet, endless, beautiful, the narrator whispered. Even gods, if they ever existed, must have nights like this, where they simply sit and listen to the breath of what they've made. Rick looked over at Morty again. The kid twitched slightly, mumbling something incoherent.
Probably dreaming of home. Rick smiled again, softer this time. "You'll wake up somewhere better, kid. You earned it." He leaned against the window. His reflection shimmered beside the infinite field of stars. Old, tired, human. For once, he didn't look like a man who ran from things. He looked like someone who had finally stopped running. Outside, the stars seemed to move closer, like they were leaning in to listen. "You ever notice," Rick murmured, "that the universe doesn't really end? It just fades, gets quieter, like it wants to be forgotten for a while." The narrator's voice returned, now so soft it was almost part of the hum. "And that's the secret, isn't it? That nothing truly ends. It only finds a place to rest." The ship continued through the sea of starlight. Rick closed his eyes again. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of everything that mattered. Every laugh, every mistake, every dream. The camera, the listener's mind, pulled back slowly. The ship became smaller, swallowed gently by the endless cosmos. But as it drifted, something shimmered in its wake, a faint trail of light, like a heartbeat lingering in the dark. The narrator spoke one last time, voice like a lullaby woven from stardust, and somewhere he's still out there, not chasing, not building, not running, just breathing with the stars. A pause. Maybe you felt it. That strange calm when you look up at the night sky and the world suddenly feels vast and soft and kind. Maybe that's him. Maybe that's the echo he left behind. Rick's dream deepened. He saw himself walking through a corridor of light. Infinite doors leading to infinite versions of him. But this time, he didn't open any. He just kept walking until the hallway turned into sky. And in that sky, he saw Beth. Not as she was, but as she might have been, laughing in sunlight, surrounded by wildflowers that shimmered with alien hues. She looked up and smiled at him, not as a daughter to a father, but as light to light. "It's okay now," she said. "You can rest." Rick smiled back, a tear glinting before it vanished into the glow. "Yeah," he whispered. "Guess I can." The light folded around him. He became smaller, softer, until he was no longer Rick, just a shimmer in the cosmic breath, part of the same hum that had always surrounded him. The narrator's voice grew fainter with each word. And so the story dissolves, not into an ending, but into stillness. You've followed him through chaos, through silence, through the space between dreams. And now, as the stars slow their turning, it's time to rest too. The ship drifted farther, the stars dimmed to a warm pulse. The universe exhaled one last time.
"In through the stars," the narrator whispered. "Out through the silence." The hum grew quieter. The words melted into white noise. A long pause. Then one final sentence. A whisper, barely louder than a heartbeat. "Good night, traveler."
Wherever you are, may the stars keep you. Silence. Just the sound of breathing. And the soft, endless night.